the renewal of our levy that will have to happen in 2022. So we're looking forward to the details of that as this year goes along. Mrs. Richardson, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Amy Phillips.
Present.
Scott Lehrman.
Present.
Jesse Campos. I see he's here. Steve Christensen. His audio looks like it's connecting. Sherry Lincoln.
Present.
Teresa Hernandez.
Present.
Nichelle Lynn. Krista Martinez.
Present.
Did we get a present from Steve Christensen yet, or?
Present.
Thanks. All right. Moving on to approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of January 12th.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the regular meeting minutes of January 12th, 2021. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Ms. Lincoln.
Yes.
Mr. Campos. Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We will now move on to the agenda review. Superintendent Whitney?
So there are no additions or changes to the board meeting agenda tonight. However, I would like to call your attention to a request for an executive session under 4231.10.1G for personnel.
And again, we will move on to special recognition with Mrs. Michelle Whitney.
So good evening, Board President Phillips, members of the board. Tonight, we have the opportunity to honor and thank a group of outstanding volunteers, champions for education, you, the Pasco School District Board of Directors. School board members play a critical role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision for the school district, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards for accountability. They also provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of children. This year, you've been honored once again as a 2020 Board of Distinction by the Washington State School Directors Association. Board meetings may happen only twice a month, but there are countless hours of preparation and research that go into every issue and decision. Besides business you see at the meetings, our board members attend events, conferences, school visits when we're allowed, and meeting with legislators, both here at home and in Olympia, and this year doing so virtually. And of course, there are everyone's favorite events, our graduations, which we're all looking forward to happening in a more traditional way in the future. A very conservative estimate puts your volunteerism at a minimum of 100 hours a year in service to our students, employees, and families of the Pasco School District. We appreciate the time and thought you spend to make sure the best interest of all students are served. This year, we would again like to honor your contribution to Pasco School District with the donation of a book to every library. Inside each book will be a sticker with your names listed to let students know that the book was donated to honor each of you. This year, we've purchased 3 books that were recommended by our librarians. So our elementary bestseller, our elementaries will get this bestseller. It's called Maybe by Kobe Yamada. New York Times bestselling author Kobe Yamada has written a story about the unbound potential you hold inside. With striking realistic illustrations, it's a reminder that you were meant for incredible things, and maybe, just maybe, you will exceed your wildest dreams. I had the opportunity to read this one this afternoon, and it's excellent. I'm holding back my kindergarten teacher from reading it to all of you tonight. It felt like a good read aloud. For our middle school students, we have a Newbery Medal winner called New Kid by Jerry Kraft. New Kid is a timely, honest graphic novel about starting over at a new school and the struggle to fit in is real. Seventh grader Jordan Banks loves nothing more than to draw cartoons about his life, but instead of sending him to an art school of his dreams, his parents enrolled him in a prestigious private school known for its academics, where Jordan soon finds himself torn between two worlds and not really fitting into either one. And for our high school students, it's called All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This book is set in a kingdom where danger lurks beneath the sea, mermaids seek violent vengeance, with song and magic is a choice. This thrilling fantasy novel follows the struggles of Amora Montara, princess of this island kingdom. To secure her place at the throne, she must provide or prove her mastery of the monarch's dangerous soul magic. So a fantasy book for our high school students. So in addition to certificates and a copy of the governor's proclamation that will be delivered to each of you, our principals have a very special message. And this year it comes in the form of a video. So Mark.
Good evening, Board President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and school board members. You might remember 6 or 8 years ago receiving a gift during this month from children in Pasco that was created by kids, and it talked about the important roles and responsibilities that board members have while serving in their role. The repeated message throughout the book went something like, but the most important thing about being a school board member is serving the students of Pasco. When we made that book several years ago, words like Zoom meetings and asynchronous learning just weren't words that we used ever. So for this year, we thought we would make a similar gift for you, but in the form of a video. We hope it makes you smile and lets you know how much your Pasco principals appreciate all you do for our district.
The most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco.
Our school board consists of 5 dedicated volunteers and 3 non-voting student representatives that make important and difficult decisions to make our schools a better place to learn.
But the most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco.
Our school board members have 3 central functions: setting goals, setting policies, and evaluating results.
But the most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco.
School board members have meetings every second and fourth Tuesday of the month that are informative and open to the public.
The most important thing about being a school board member is about serving the children of Pasco. School board members approve district budgets and expenditures. The most important thing of being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco. School board members visit schools for special events, performances, and family involvement activities. But the most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco. Like us! Los miembros de la mesa directiva escolar establecieron las necesidades específicas y la cantidad de dinero para el bono y las elecciones levies. School board members established the specific needs and dollar amounts for our bond and levy election. Pero lo más importante de ser miembro del consejo escolar, también conocido como school board member, es servir a los niños de Pasco.
School board members work within the community to increase understandings of our school, our systems in Pasco.
Most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco.
School board members have families, jobs, hobbies, and other commitments that they balance while serving and guiding our school district.
But the most important thing about being a school board member is serving the children of Pasco.
We're lucky to have such dedicated people on our school board in Pasco. The important thing is about being the school board member
Board President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and school board members, thank you again for your time and service you give to our Pasco School District. During these unprecedented times, one of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes continues to come to my mind, especially having this pandemic be a first for all of us. It reads, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." We as principals know that you as board members are doing the very best that you can, and we thank you for your commitment to our students, staff, and community. We hope you enjoy this gift basket and a delicious meal from a small local business. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts, your Pasco principals.
Thank you, Scarrow Bound.
So truly, Board President Phillips, members of the board, thank you for your dedicated service. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate you than that very, very special video. I saw it already once today. I practiced not crying and I didn't succeed this evening. They were absolutely incredible. It's fun to see our kids. So Board President Phillips.
Thank you so much. I think we all received a gift basket. We've hopefully already received it. And it was sweet, and it still had a handwritten note, which I didn't know if we would get this year. We usually get one. And I was out when they delivered it, but my children told me that 2 people came to the door and delivered it, and I was just touched. And that was a beautiful video. Thank you for taking the time to compose that. Do we have any other comments from the board?
I just want to say thank you as well. I wasn't home when they came by. I am sorry I missed it, but thank you, principals, for the work that you do. Thanks for recognizing us. Thanks for that basket of goodies and the gift certificate. And thanks for the beautiful video. Thank you, kids, for participating in it. We do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you to Miss Mantha and Miss Sisney for dropping those baskets by and coordinating the video, and thanks to all the principals, teachers, everyone. I saw this, I have this book on my desk. So for all of us, those kind of messages are special. Sometimes we don't always see the positives. We hear when people have issues or challenges, and we appreciate those kind words. So thank you.
Yes, thank you to all the principals. And I was home also when it was delivered, and I appreciate the basket. Thank you so much.
Looks like Jesse's having some audio issues tonight. So,
I'm sorry, Jesse. All right, now we will move on to audience comments. So right now we're going to invite members of the public to make audience comments. In the Zoom meeting, please raise your hand and Mr. Garrett will indicate when it is your turn. Please state your name and affiliation with the district as you speak. Note that audience comments will be kept to 2 minutes. And if more time is needed, you are welcome to email the board or to reach out to the superintendent's office. Please keep in mind that all comments are being broadcast to the live streaming audience and reflect the opinion or perspective of the speaker. Mr. Garrett?
Thank you, Board President Phillips. Just a quick recap. You mentioned the process, but just to clarify, if you're an attendee and you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your digital hand. Should be located at the bottom of your screen or phone. And then we can see that digital hand on our side, and we'll go ahead and enable you one by one. We'll announce your name and then do our best to announce who will be following the current commenter. As Ms. Phillips stated, you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. Once your comment is complete or your 2 minutes is up, we will mute your microphone and lower your hand just so we can keep track of who's made comments. So if you'd like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand and we will get started. Margarita Morphine, you're going to be our first commenter, and then Shelley Wandler. will be up after Miss Morphine. Miss Morphine.
Thank you, board members, for all your hard work, teachers, and all staff from Presque School District. I was hoping not to be the first one, but I just want to say I support Scott and what he said last time. I am speaking as an individual in the community, as a taxpayer, and I'm going to read a quote from Martin Luther King. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in a moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at time of challenge and controversy. Then I read this other quote from an article. We still cannot talk about white privilege and racism without being told to be quiet, without being told we are unprofessional, without being told we are radical or outrageous, or without being told we need to leave. Have you ever been spoken loudly at a cash register because of the color of your skin? Because the cash register thinks you can't understand English? I have. Have your children ever been chased through the city and screamed to go back where they came from? My children have. Have you ever been at the parent-teacher conference and the teacher keeps asking if you understand what she's telling you? Even though you introduce yourself as, hi, I am so, and I am a teacher at Pasco. She did not hear the last part of your conversation. I have. Have your children's bike ever been run down because of the color of the skin? My kids have. Have you ever been held to a higher standard because of the color of your skin? I have. Have you ever been given an evaluation with a different name just because of the color of your skin? I have. And this was for when I was acquiring my certification as a teacher. This is just a few experiences my family and I have gone through. And this is what we go as colored people every day. It's not that we don't live it, but we do. And this is a lot of kids in Pasco. And another note, speaking for equity for our students, what will happen to distant learners when we go back for longer hours? What would happen to zooming in with the teacher, the classroom teacher? The distance program have that offered the iPal is not for dual language students. The students were told that they were gonna have a different teacher since December. They haven't. Teachers are working longer hours and people still don't understand. We are exhausted, parents are exhausted, kids are exhausted. So we are all suffering together. And it's not because of the laziness of
Thank you, Ms. Morphine. Shelley Wandler, you'll be our next commenter, and then Maria Rodriguez will be after Shelley. Shelley, your microphone is enabled.
Shelley Wandler, teacher at Reynolds. I've spent 13 years in Pasco teaching. Before that, I spent 13 years in industry. In neither case did I sign up to be a frontline worker. In neither case did I say I was willing to put my own health and safety and that of my family aside. I signed up to be an educator, to teach others, not to be a nurse, counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist, and diagnose, not to be a police officer, to handle drug, alcohol, weapons, and gang issues, and not to be a glorified babysitter so others can work. Again, I signed up to be an educator, not to be in a state of anxiety, wondering if this will be the day one of my students shows up contagious, to wonder how am I supposed to teach double masked, as that is what they are suggesting with the new variant. Not to mention the face shield I am to wear as an accommodation for a student to read my lips that I must now turn into a hood for proper safety. I've put in for distance teaching, but will most likely not get a placement, as my greatest health risk is not to myself, but to my family. However, I will put my safety first. I will make that hood, and I will double mask. I will likely get headaches and dizzy spells from being double masked for an hour and 20 minutes at a time. So I will use my 5 minutes between students to get fresh air and change my masks. The filtration of the air in a building only happens at the intake, so I will keep my door and windows open no matter the temperature to maintain good airflow. I will do what I must because I am an educator. But this is also part of the reason there is a shortage of us nationwide because we are not just educators anymore. We are so much more than what we signed up to be. And why so many of us burn out so quickly. Thank you, board.
Thank you, Ms. Wandler. Maria Rodriguez, you are next. Again, a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your digital hand. It should be at the bottom of your screen. Maria, your microphone is enabled.
Dear President Phillips and member of the Pasco School Board, the kindergarten teaching team at Robert Frost Elementary School would like to offer our input regarding the planned extension of our school day effective Monday, February 1st, 2021. We have some serious concerns about this decision and its potential impact on both students and staff, specifically one, extending the elementary school day to 1:55 p.m. only immediately benefits those students who are attending school in person. Unfortunately, it does not adequately address the needs of our distance learners. Currently at Frost, we have 20 kindergarten children, or 27% of those students whose families currently are keeping their children at home. After we begin the hybrid model of learning, it became apparent there was insufficient planning for the academic needs of our distance learners. To better meet their needs, we extended our Zoom sessions to 65 minutes a day. We have spent untold hours planning and adapting our kindergarten curriculum to devote all with what we are teaching in class. All our students are benefiting from the reinforcement that increased Zoom time is providing them. The school day will likely be extended on Monday, once again, with no plan immediately in place for our distance learners. This is completely unacceptable. What we are currently doing appears to be working for most of our kindergarten students and is equitable for all learners. And two, the second factor that we are concerned about is staff safety. We believe that by extending the school day, teachers, paras, and other school staff members' health and safety will be compromised. We understand that there are many factors to be taken into consideration as Pasco School District moves forward with plans for extending the school day. We strongly believe that this step should not be taken until the above two factors are adequately addressed. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our feedback. Sincerely, Maria Rodriguez, Stephanie Carlson, Sabina Lombera, and Jeanette Lujan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Rodriguez. Sue Stotch will be up next. And again, a reminder, if you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your digital hand. Sue, your microphone has been enabled.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I couldn't see myself. So I'd like to make talk about two issues really quick. First issue is safety. So, kind of measuring out my classroom today, it's approximately 624 square feet. Setting up my tables at most, if I stay at my desk, I can see maybe having 10 or 11 students in the classroom if I space out the desks and chairs using the 6 feet apart guidelines. And that's including leaving a space for myself at the front of the room so I can use the whiteboard, since we are all convinced that this will be best for kids. I would like to be able to do some teaching at the board. I currently don't see any way that I can fit 15 students in my classroom, all at 6 feet apart, and teach them. So basically, I feel like what I'm being asked to do is to supervise other people's children. I'm being asked to babysit. Okay. The other issue is the sanitizing. Who's going to sanitize? How well is that going to be done? This schedule that someone came up with has 10 minutes in between two classes. Am I spending my time sanitizing and babysitting, or am I teaching, which is supposedly what is best for kids? So there won't be any small groups. There won't be getting up and moving around. There won't be any socializing, despite what some students may think it's going to look like coming back. I will have a window open and my door open to create that flow. So gloves, hats, jackets will be needed. If I cannot get a virtual teaching job, I will definitely be putting in for a leave of absence. I do not feel safe coming back. I should be able to be vaccinated, get my full vaccines before I am asked to put my life at risk in order to babysit or supervise children. I feel I'm doing really well right now, and I'm getting better and better at virtual teaching. Is disruption to students and classes. It's not going to bode anybody. It's not going to be better, and it's not going to be what's best for kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stotch. Heather Merlot, you're up next. Your microphone has been enabled, Ms. Merlot.
Thank you. Yes, I second, third, fourth, everything everyone has just been saying. I also would like to address the many, many concerns of expanding the day and the number of people in person. It just, everything has been implemented in such a disastrous way every step of the way, and there is still no good plan in place. It almost feels like the district and board's strategic plan is to throw things at the face of the teachers and to have them deal last minute and figure it out, because the communication is nothing's being communicated. Things aren't waiting till things are bargained. And now what? The distance learners are going to get nothing from their homeroom teachers if we implement extended day in the first, until after the reshuffle, when they have a completely new teacher, whatever's going to happen at that time. Nobody knows, because it's all a mystery behind closed doors. And so why not wait and do all at the same time with the reshuffle, instead of further neglecting those distance learners? For me, it's 13 out of 24 kids. So why are we continuing to neglect them? You know, I've thought for months that every single board meeting, it is very obvious that you're all coming from a place of privilege. And it really saddens me and disheartens me that you don't care about what is happening for other people other than people who are like you, of the same mindset. It is just sad that you don't feel like you should represent all of Pasco, but only those who are like-minded as yourselves. And it really is just so disheartening. I can't fully express how hurtful it is. And then at the end of your board meetings, you always say, oh, we love our teachers, we're grateful for our teachers. That's just like pouring salt in the wound, because your actions speak the contrary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merlot. Dawn Johnson, you are next. Ms. Johnson, your microphone is enabled.
Can you hear me? Yes?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make a few comments. One concern I have is that we've been really struggling to get kids to attend, and it's been a great effort and a lot of phone calls home to get students to be in Zoom classes. And currently we have them 4 days a week. I've had almost perfect attendance in most of my classes after the first, say, 3 weeks maybe. And that's been pretty awesome to have that many students in. And when I have students in for that 40 minutes every day, normally I can encourage the difficulty I've had has been getting them to do asynchronous work. But when I can get them in and then I just give them little bites to do every day, gradually the amount that they have been completing has been increasing every day. I can say, okay, just get this done for the next class and just get this done for the next class. And I've been making it bite-sized and they've been consuming and their grades are improving steadily. We've been doing nonstop phone calls for every single F and trying everything we can to get kids engaged, and they are slowly becoming more and more engaged. One of the problems I foresee, I spoke with my kids today and showed them what the choices are. One of the problems I foresee is only on 2 days a week, there's 3 days of heavy synchronous learning that's been attached. We're talking about kids that are babysitting other kids, at home at Stevens Middle School, most of our population. A lot of them do not have parents at home. They do not have parents that can support them in the language. And they also are expected to do other responsibilities. If they start going into school only 2 days a week, that's 3 days a week that they're not going to be, for the most part, engaged, because there'll be nobody really encouraging them. Yes, they will have opportunities for specials at the end of the day, but that's not their content areas. That's putting a whole bunch of math and science into 2 days with a lot of days without direction. And English language learners, which Stevens is a high.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Johnson. Your 2 minutes is up. Heidi Nelson, you'll be the next commenter. Heidi, your microphone is enabled.
Hello, I'm a history teacher at Chiawana, and I don't have anywhere near 2 minutes of things to say, but I just wanted to ask you to please consider waiting until those of us who are older or high risk or have conditions that make us higher risk, waiting till we can get our vaccinations, and that's so close. We're so close to that. And also, please wait until the trimester is over, because I can't even imagine how that's going to work, to interrupt their trimester, change their schedules, etc., and then try to pick up where we left off. We're so close to vaccinations. We're so close to the trimester. I think you'd have a lot more teachers on board if you would do those two things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Nelson. Board President Phillips, there are no more people indicating they'd like to make a comment.
Thank you for your comments. We will move on now to reports on educating students in a COVID-19 environment update. And Ms. Whitney will give us that report.
Good evening, Board President Phillips, members of the board. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to provide another educating students in a COVID environment update. I do have some friends and colleagues to help me with the presentation tonight. We do have Dr. Person, who was invited to attend. I'm going to click through and see if she's on yet this evening. So Dr. Persons was invited to attend, and then I also have oh, Jenny, Amy, can you go back and do consent agenda?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I crossed everything out, and that's not crossed out. I don't know why I skipped it. So we have consent agenda, A, personnel, and B, warrants. I would entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Can I have a roll call vote, please? Mrs. Richardson?
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Lincoln?
Yes.
Mr. Campos? He's having audio issues. Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman?
Yes.
Thank you. So now we will allow Ms. Whitney to continue with her presentation.
Okay, sorry about that, Amy. So Dr. Persons is invited. I don't see her on the call yet, so we'll check in with her, but I also have a number of other district staff who are going to help with the presentation this evening. So our purpose is to talk about the community health conditions data as we've traditionally shared. It does have a different look tonight, so I'll share that new look for you and explain why that is. And then also we have the updated health recommendation that came right before the school board meeting last or 2 weeks ago. So this is the first opportunity for us to discuss that recommendation in public. We'll also do a short update on some of our safety and mitigation strategies. And then the bulk of our presentation will be done in collaboration with Susan Sparks, Mark Garrett, and Jenny Rodriguez, that is focused on our elementary path forward with revised timelines, which they're revised based on board's feedback to accelerate our timelines, and also some community feedback to accelerate timelines, as well as tentative schedules. Again, the same for middle school and high school, a revised accelerated timeline recommendation, and then some tentative schedules for both middle school and high school. So that will be the bulk of the presentation. So I'm going to make one last look for Dr. Person before I jump into presenting her information. And I don't see her. So we have typically provided the board an update of public health data. And we've done this a number of different ways. Initially, we were providing multiple slides with some visualizations from the Washington Department of Health dashboard. Then we were using those Washington Department of Health dashboard visualizations to populate what I called the rainbow chart, which was a chart from the CDC that had some risk level indicators. They've again changed the visualizations for our data, our health data. So now when you go to look at the health data, it's no longer organized by county, it's organized by region. And we're part of the South Central region. So as you look at these data points, it's no longer just Franklin County, it encapsulates broader counties that surround us. So these 4 data visualizations take into account the trend in cases, which you can see there. And this is a rolling 14-day average, or a rolling 14-day rate for what they are calling the most recent period. This dashed line is incomplete data. So this dark line represents the rolling average, or the last 14 days of completed data. So you can see this point right here is at 897 cases. And then you can see here, these are the date range that they're comparing. Same here, trends in hospital admissions. These are the date ranges. This is historical data. This is the previous 14-day period. This is the most recent 14-day period. And then this right here is incomplete data. So our hospital trend, when you look at this data, is down 36%. And then there's the percentage of ICU occupancy through January 10th through the 16th. The orange line represents a target. The hope would be that we would be at that targeted level. So you can see that that we're right there for percentage of ICU occupancy, and then our positive percentage of positivity for our testing, that is no longer looking at 14 days, it's looking at 7 days. So you can see that historical data there. So these data...
Michelle?
Yes. Oh, thank goodness, Dr. So maybe you can jump in here and help explain this data better than I could. And then if you want to describe your recommendation to the board, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm so glad you're here.
Yes, and I apologize for...
Oh, no need. We're just glad you're here now.
Yes. All right. So the data looks primarily because it was changed to accommodate the recommendations around the regional road to recovery that the governor set. So many of the metrics are the same ones we have always followed. They are now defined, though, by region rather than just by Franklin County. You can still find specific county-specific data. It's just buried a little lower on their website. What is important to note is that what we're really following now is more the trends rather than the specific numbers. And the reason for that is that we have found that case rates per 100,000 over 14 days, so disease activity, those numbers mean different things in different counties. For example, our very urban areas tend not to be able to tolerate higher case rates because of the volume of people and the sort of closer persons per square mile that they have. Whereas in our area, we have actually had much higher case rates without the significant impact on the hospitalizations. So the line is showing the difference between 2-week periods. This does have some more variability. For example, last week, our rates had dropped by several percent, and then this week they're up by a few percent. Next week they'll likely be down again. Our overall disease activity is going down. We had a peak after the holidays, as we would expect, but that has plateaued and is now decreasing. Same thing, our hospitalizations have remained static. That's the second one across. Well, actually, the hospitalizations have gone down. Staffed ICU occupancy has remained at a static level. That represents people hospitalized in the ICU for all reasons. So it actually, a majority of those are non-COVID related. And then the final one is our testing percentage. That one, it's a little harder to interpret on this graph because the incomplete data is actually incomplete because we only have the positive, not the negative test data. So unlike case rates that typically become higher when you get complete data, our test percentage tends to actually look lower once we get complete data. What we know from our test sites, which is where over 90% of the testing in our community occurs, we are seeing 9 to 11% test positivity in the most recent 2-week period. So all actually very encouraging signs that our disease activity is decreasing, our hospital status is stable to improving. So the disease metrics, the updated recommendation from the Department of Health, which they issued before the holiday break, were a couple of the driving factors for me to release the new recommendation from Benton Franklin Health District. So the updated recommendation from the Department of Health increased the cutoff for disease activity for what's considered high COVID disease activity. That was recognition of the fact that there could be much more COVID-19 disease activity in a community, and that would not affect disease transmission in schools. The other change that the Department of Health made in their recommendation was that at all levels of disease activity, there is an expectation that students will be brought back into school, starting with the youngest learners and those at highest risk, but that progression will continue. That is based on evidence from schools that have returned in Washington State, and again, from the growing body of evidence that we see nationally and internationally that continues to support the fact that schools, when they are implementing the appropriate infection control protocols, do not contribute to community disease activity and do not represent a risk for students or staff to become infected with COVID-19. In fact, outbreak data from the state of Washington looking at schools, because they have recruited those, the difference between schools that are all remote or hybrid, there is none. Why isn't that? And that's because the vast majority of those outbreaks have occurred among staff, and generally during break times or other times when safety protocols may be relaxed. This is not, I will say, this is not unique to schools. We see this in other businesses, healthcare facilities, everywhere where people do know those protocols. It's when they're on break or where they feel safe or comfortable that sometimes those procedures are relaxed. But we do not see outbreaks related to interactions between students to students, students to staff, outside of some of those classrooms where children, for their underlying medical conditions, cannot use masks. And that's why the recommendation from Labor and Industry and from the Department of Health is that staff in those classrooms do use the higher level of protection. So all of that is the long way around to say that the updated recommendation from myself and the health district was that after the 3 weeks after returning from the holiday break, to give us a chance to see what the post-holiday surge might look like, and to be assured that we had passed that schools that were already doing some version of hybrid learning or in-person learning continue to phase in students. What that means for schools already providing elementary education, it means looking at introducing those secondary students. And again, that's based on information we have showing that when students or staff in schools get infected, primarily occurring either in households or in their out of school interactions, and that schools themselves are not the cause of disease spread either in the community or within the school. And knowing the value of education and the other value that being in school brings to some children makes this our recommendation at this time.
So Board President Phillips, I would pause there and allow the board to ask Dr. Person any questions. We do have a couple of slides on mitigation strategies, and then we'll go into the instructional component of the presentation. But if the board had clarifying questions or questions for Dr. Persons, now would be a good time.
Thank you, Dr. Persons. We are so grateful that you can be here with us, and we appreciate your guidance and all of that. Are there any questions from our board members?
So just a quick question. Thank you, Dr. Person, for coming and joining us tonight. One of our commenters tonight suggested that we're going to be double masking. I don't know if these things have changed, and I don't want to, I'm just wondering, has the protocols changed, or do you anticipate them changing?
We do not anticipate them changing. We have seen things in the news or discussion around double masking, primarily related to the variant, that B.1.1.7 variant that is more transmissible. At this point, we don't see a need for double masking. The virus mutation being more transmissible is related to the characteristics of the virus itself. It's not related to the characteristics of droplets, small or large, by which that virus travels. And masking is designed to protect us against droplets. So at this time, there is no recommendation coming from Benton Franklin Health District, Department of Health, or the CDC on the use of double masking. The recommendation still remains to use masks appropriately and that they be worn correctly.
Thank you.
There are no other questions for Dr. Persons. I will continue through. I think Dr. Persons will stick around for our whole report, so I don't think this is your only opportunity to ask her questions, but Board President Phillips, with your permission, I'll continue. Okay. So thinking and talking about our safety and mitigation strategies, we reported to the board last time we were together about a couple of new pieces that we were adding to our repertoire of safety and mitigation strategies. And one of those was utilization of our safety committees, which was directly connected to the proclamation from Governor Inslee, most recent proclamation requiring that we utilize our existing accident prevention programs, which require site-based safety committees, as a mechanism for monitoring compliance for mitigation strategies. And so what I'm highlighting for you tonight is each of our buildings are meeting with their safety committees right now weekly. Over time, that could change to less frequently, but right now we felt like weekly was important given the importance of monitoring our mitigation strategies for compliance and really honoring and empowering those closest to that effort in our teachers and our principals in those safety committees. So right now they're meeting weekly. Each time they meet, they have a structured agenda that they go through, and they do a survey out to the rest of the staff on site. Survey results are collected, and that then facilitates action planning for the areas that each individual building will focus on that's specific to their needs. So these are some examples or highlights from the first set of surveys. Since this survey, there have been 2 more, so we've now gotten 3 data points, but this is just highlighting from the first survey. So the first round of surveys across all of our buildings, we had about almost 1,400 responses received. Approximately just over 1,000 of those staff reported working on site in the prior work week. The largest group of respondents were teachers, followed by other certificated employees, which would be like your counselors, nurses, etc., and then followed by paraprofessionals. Employees indicated that they were wearing their masks and that they noticed that their colleagues were wearing their masks. They also indicated that compliance with social distancing and cleaning protocols, that was identified most often as an area of focus or concern for the buildings. People felt very comfortable with the training around COVID protocols. That was a clear highlight from the data and a point of celebration that people felt prepared and trained. And people were comfortable with and are completing the daily health screening. So training in the daily health screening for employees was a clear celebration of the data. And most employees are comfortable with their access to PPE. Some employees indicated that they weren't sure how to get more if they needed it. So certainly an area that we can easily clear up and communicate and educate about how people can request PPE. So the surveys will be a powerful tool as building principals and teacher teams and employee teams at the site level monitor where the concerns are popping up for their buildings. Do they need to train around how to access PPE? You know, how do we help comply with social distancing? What do we need to do to increase frequency of cleaning protocols or the perception of cleaning protocols being followed, etc. So we're excited about these efforts. We know that the best solutions come by empowering those closest to the work to be involved in the solution finding. And we think that the safety committees will be a really powerful tool for doing that. So it's kind of a one of those, sometimes we think odd occurrences where a mandate and from a proclamation from the governor is in alignment with a practice that we already had in place. We're just utilizing that practice slightly differently to make really, I think, extraordinary benefits in a compliance arena for safety and mitigation strategies. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Susan Sparks, who was integral in helping with our safety site reviews. She attended every site visit with our contractor, Mr. Stephen Bump. And so I'll turn it over to Susan to talk about that process.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitney. And good evening to our board president, Phillips, and to board members. And again, congratulations on just your honor for your board and your just being honored. We appreciate you. So just wanted to get that out there before I started. So I'd like to share some information with you regarding the third-party review of the implementation of our COVID-19 safety protocols, specifically in our elementary schools. So last week, Mr. Steve Bump from NV5, he was the consultant that was hired. He and along with the team of district staff physically walked through all 18 elementary schools, including our early learning center, to review the safety protocols and procedures and our mitigation strategies currently in place, and also to gain some insight on lunch and recess procedures as we plan to extend our days. So, and I'll just share a few of the observations that he made and notes that he gave to us as he walked through our buildings. So he visited each one of our care rooms and he wanted to verify that we were using the correct PPEs. He also wanted to know what was the process that we were using for responding to students when they came to the care room and how we were contacting families and so forth. He found that our procedures were consistent and appropriate across the schools in those areas. He also indicated when just looking at our basic protocols and procedures in terms of our mitigation strategies that they are consistent with the guidelines from both the CDC and also our local health department in regards to our social distancing, our hand washing, and the protocols that we have in place. He did notice in almost each of our schools, when we looked at like our staff lounges, our workrooms, that we do need to post some occupancy numbers. So that was a recommendation that he made in addition to walking into those rooms. So if there's 4 tables, he wanted only 4 chairs in those spaces, just to not have that temptation of additional people in those spaces. So that was one recommendation probably across the board. He also recommended that we recheck our 6-foot social distancing between our desks in our classroom. We started off with that, and we just need to make sure that those have continued. You know, kids scoot their desks, custodians come in and clean. So he recommended that we go in and just double check those. One of the things that he spent a lot of time with our principals talking about lunch procedures. And so he discussed with them how can they use that spacing in their both their cafeterias and their gyms to accommodate their students for lunch, making sure that they have the 6-foot distancing, students all facing the same direction. He talked to them about traffic patterns, where students can enter and exit. So those conversations, I think, were very productive with the principals, and they appreciated his input on that. Okay, next slide, Superintendent Whitney.
Ms. Sparks, what is a care room?
So our care rooms, that's a good question, Mr. Lehrman. Each one of our schools, we have a care room. It's a room that's designated for any students that exhibit any of the symptoms that are aligned with COVID-19. So if a student comes and has a temperature that morning, because every student's their temperature is taken. So if they have a temperature, they have a cough, there is a procedure where the nurse is usually radioed. We have hired what we call our care room. They're like a parapro. They attend those rooms, and so the student is escorted to that room. The rooms are, they probably have about 4 or 5 chairs in there that are spread out across the room. The care room attendants, they have PPEs where they wear gowns, they take temperatures. The nurse usually comes out to check on the student, to verify if that's a student that they need to call home and have the parent come and pick them up. So each school has that, and so that kids who are exhibiting any kind of symptoms that are consistent with COVID are separated from our health rooms, where kids come to get their normal medication, or they come to get their diabetes or whatever. We have those care rooms that are separate so that the students are not mixed.
Is it an acronym, or is it related to like the CARES Act?
So we called it the care room because we want those students to be taken care of. We didn't want to call it like the COVID room, or we wanted to sound like we were caring for our students. So it's a term of endearment.
Yeah, I believe in the guidance, it called out the need for what in the guidance was called an isolation room, and we just resisted that label, and so the term care room was evolved. The other 2 pieces I just wanted to highlight really quickly and add to the great description that Susan gave is the care room aides, the health room aides that are in the care rooms are, like Susan said, retrofitted with additional PPE, including gowns and a higher level of masking. And then we also have placed a HEPA filter, like a portable filtering unit in those rooms to increase the filtering in those rooms, because they're designed to have people in there that are exhibiting symptoms. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 additional pieces. So thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitney. And those health aides have been specifically trained for that position. They work closely with our nurses. I know that the elementary principals really appreciate having that staff and having that space for their students.
These are specifically for COVID symptoms then?
Correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we've completed all of our elementary school site visits. As Mr. Bump was walking around, he did provide the building principals with specific information or recommendations for their building in particular. And so our building principals are acting on those recommendations depending on what they were. We do plan to schedule walkthroughs for our middle and high schools here in the next couple of weeks. And then we expect to have a full summary from Mr. Bump. He did provide us with an overview of our elementary. I believe we received an email late last night. So Mrs. Whitney and I will take time to go through that, the full report. But we will get a full report from our entire district before our secondary students come on site. So I actually enjoyed the walks. It was good to see. And I do want to say that Mr. Bump was very impressed with our elementary principals. He did say they had been very creative in their processes, and that they really took to heart the work that they're doing in the building and keeping students and staff safe. Any other questions about those walks? Okay. We will go on then into the next part of our presentation is on instruction. This is a slide that might seem a little familiar to you. We shared a similar slide with the board back in December. This slide just shows you the total building enrollment, how many of our students are attending in person, how many are attending our distance learners, are doing at-home learning, and then that rate of enrollment of in-person. So you can see from this slide that we have about 75% of our students are attending in-person instruction. It does vary across the district. If you look at Markham, they have 92% of their students that are attending in person, and Curie down to 57%, with an average though of 75%. We went back and looked at December and it was also 75%. So very little change from what our students or our families had selected to do. So we thought you would be interested in seeing that. And then on the next couple of slides, Mark is going to review for you just actual attendance data. So looking at our students in terms of whether they're in blended or they're in person, what is our attendance data?
So I've got a quick question before we go there. So on that last slide that you had up there, so was this a conscious choice, or did we just go all hybrid and those who just selected not to come are considered distance learning? Do you understand my question?
I think so. If I don't answer it, please let me know, Steve. So in November, when we had decided that we could bring students back, we gave families the option or the choice to come in person to be a part of our blended learning, or to be a distance learner, or to stay at home. So families made those choices, and we had families that were going in and out. So when, for example, it was probably in early part of December when the infection rate increased in our community, some of our families, I should say, some of our families decided they were coming in person and they decided to go to distance learning. They were able to do that. So we did not prevent families from changing. So this is based on what families selected. So when we pulled this data for Monday, this is where the families had selected. We have a way of tracking this in our Power School when families make that choice. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so partially it did. I mean, so are they able to change that now periodically still? It's not, I just want to make sure I'm understanding so that when we see the data that it makes sense.
Yes.
So, I mean, we could have somebody who 1 week is in person, the next week they've chosen to be a distance learner, and the next week, okay.
Yes, that is true.
All right. Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, as Ms. Sparks said, that I'll walk you through the next few slides about attendance. So good evening, board. The slide you're looking at shows a distribution of attendance by learning model over the past 3 weeks. You can see the days across the horizontal axis there. On the bottom, we have students that bottom dark blue segment, we have students that are absent, and these are students that are absent from any learning model. And if you look left to right, you can see that we have roughly 10% absenteeism rate day to day. So on any particular day, 10% will be absent. The next three colors all have to deal with students participating in the blended learning model. The orange segment represents blended students that attended in person. There's a small sliver of gray above that, and that represents students who were supposed to attend in person on a particular date, but instead attended remotely via Zoom or some other asynchronous activity. This could be for various reasons. Maybe the student screened out and is following our COVID protocol. Maybe the family's out of town. But for whatever reason, these students are still engaging in their learning, even though they missed their in-person day. Taking a next step up, the yellow bar represents the percentage of blended learners in attendance during their at-home learning day. So for example, this is, if you're in cohort A, your at-home learning days are Thursday, Friday, and vice versa for B. And then lastly, that top light blue segment on top of the stack column there represents the percentage of elementary students attending the distance learning model. So you can get an idea of how students are receiving their instruction, but this also gives us an idea of where students are receiving their instruction. So again, looking at that orange segment, that's our in-person learners. Those students are physically on campus getting face-to-face instruction, and that averages about 35% on any given day. So about a little over a third of our elementary population is in attendance on any given day. The top three segments, the blended in-person, remote, blended at home, and then distance learning, those are all taking place online, and that averages about 55% if you look across the board there. So we have our 35%, 55%, that gets us to 90, and then the 10% students absent on any given day accounts for all of our elementary students. All right, we can go to the next slide.
Question or observation for you, Mark. So if 74% of our students, I think is what you said earlier, 75% are in-person, blended learning, they're in two cohorts, so we'd expect 36, 37% to attend school every day. That looks like that orange bar, dark orange, is pretty close to that. And we actually, when you look at the blended at home, there's less of them logging on to the at home of those two cohorts. On their off days, there's a bigger absence percentage on the remote learning for the blended in-person learners.
And there's a little, that's actually a really good segue to the next slide.
Okay.
So,
and then wait, one more question there. What's our normal absenteeism rate on a normal non-COVID year? Is it about 10%, or are we higher or lower?
It's about 10%. Back in, we presented some information in the December board meeting, and it was about 10%.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So this should help answer that question, Mr. Lehrman. We specifically wanted to dig in to the three different learning models that you can see there, the blended in person, blended at home, and then distance learning, and look at each of those attendance rates. And you can see that they are pretty much identical. You need to pay close attention to that horizontal axis on the left there. It's condensed just so we can get some space in between the three bars, or excuse me, the three lines. But pretty much across the board, you see about 90% attendance rate, give or take a percentage point. So very, very similar. On the previous slide, we did see that we had that 10% absenteeism rate. So looking at this chart, we can say that that absenteeism is pretty much equally distributed across the various learning models. So lots of information on the past two slides. Really shows how students are learning, where they're learning, and then the rate at which they're attending. Is there any questions before we move on?
So I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure I have heard reports from some teachers that those blended learners in person, that they're seeing like half their class not showing up. So that must mean that there are some schools, if we divided this by individual schools, we would probably see some results that are dramatically different than these averages. Is that a fair statement?
So I did break it down by school, and largely it's the same. It might just be, maybe breaking it down to classroom. Maybe that's when you actually see it. But really at the school level, it really hovers around that same attendance rate.
So maybe when they say only 25% of my class is coming, or only 50% of my class is coming, they really mean 50% of my class has opted into distance learning. Not that they're enrolled in person and not showing up.
And there are some classrooms like that where they have a higher percentage of distance learners.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's, I mean, I trust that information is accurate, but it's pretty consistent, which is interesting. We're not seeing big swings one way or the other. It's been pretty consistent across the board. So one other thing. So I believe there are some students that are there every day, some of our most at-risk students, correct?
Correct.
Are they figured in this model somewhere?
Yes, those are they're the in-person. They fall under the blended in-person category since they attend every day.
So that would explain why the blended in-person is a little higher.
Yeah, that answers my question as to why it was up at 37 in person, and it was down at 33, 34 for at home blended. It's probably, like you just said, like Mr. Christensen just said, a little different cohort on one of those lines, a little bigger cohort.
And we do, our A cohort is a little bit bigger than our B cohort. It just somehow worked out that way. And so you can kind of see that in the data with those Mondays, Monday, Tuesdays, and comparing them to Thursday, Fridays. All right, with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Rodriguez to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Board President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, members of the board, I'm pleased to be with you this evening. Happy Board Appreciation Month. We're excited to be able to celebrate you a little bit tonight. I'm going to jump right in. I have a lot of information to share with you this evening around our path forward by level. So we'll first take a look at the elementary path forward. I'll be reviewing our target timelines, our proposed timelines this evening. And then I also will be sharing with you our proposed schedules, which will show you what it will look like, a life in the student, a week in the life of a student who is opting into the in-person program, or a week in the life of a student who is choosing to do the distance learning program. So I'm going to jump right in with elementary first. Parents have been asked to select one of three models. So a little earlier in this presentation, Mr. Christensen, you asked about our families kind of hopping back and forth model to model. They are and have been. However, we are asking that families moving forward, as we get ready to really transition and have really separate models for parents to maximize their time for their students with their teachers, that they select one of these models, which would be in place for their student through the rest of this school year. So they would be picking to opt into the blended in-person learning. They could choose to do all distance learning, or as always, they can opt into our IPAL program. That continues to be an option that families can select at any time. By this Friday, January 29th, we're asking that families make that selection. Information went out from our public affairs office yesterday, so families received emails, an app blast if you're signed up for our PSD app. If you're not, this is my PSA, please sign up for our PSD app. It's a great way to get most up-to-date information. It's also available on our PSD website at www.psd1.org, and there's a banner right at the top that will direct you to the information. There is the same information that you see here, that you are making the selection for the rest of this school year. So this is really your spring enrollment form, that you do the selection through that online form. If we don't hear from a family, then we will be reaching out. So our building staff are contacting families to find out which option they would like and make sure that they have the opportunity to get that form completed by our deadline of Friday. Again, if we don't hear from you, we will be calling you. Someone from the district will be contacting you to get that information. If after multiple attempts we're not able to connect with a family, then the student would be placed into the program that most closely aligns with their current enrollment. So for example, if a family right now had previously selected distance learning, and we don't have any evidence they're doing something different, and we haven't been able to reach them after a handful of tries to do so, we would place them into that distance learning model moving forward for the remainder of this year. Families who are choosing blended learning, so if they pick that #1 option there, they will also take care of completing the trimester 3 COVID-19 screening attestation, which is required at the same time. So we're just going to take care of that for families all at once in a single form so that they don't have to hop back on later and do that. I'm going to talk you through the revised accelerated timeline recommendation. So when we met with you 2 weeks ago, we presented some target dates and some suggested timelines. Based on feedback, we have been asked to accelerate that timeline, so we have done so. We are currently in the preparation phase. So again, we have communicated with our families and requested their choice by this Friday, January 29th. We are continuing to communicate, collaborate, and bargain with our labor partners. Starting next week, February 1st through 12th is really our implementation portion of the timeline. We are looking at extending the elementary day for our in-person learners beginning February 1st. Once we have the data from families about which model they would like, we will be initiating our staffing process, communicating with parents, and then tackling teacher movement and preparation as needed based on the number of families that opt into the distance learning model. And then our transition targeted start date is February 15th, at which point students would then be in their new model, which would be the model for the remainder of the year, to provide as much consistency as we can for families. Again, either the blended learning, the at-home learning 2.0, which would look a lot like what we had in the fall, or IPAL, again, is still an option. I'm going to show you what the schedules will look like. Again, these are schedules that are kind of day in the life or week in the life of a student. So this first slide is for our early start elementary schools. So these are our East Side and Central elementary schools. And as we've talked about before, all students are assigned to either cohort A, those would be students who would attend on-site on Mondays and Tuesdays, or cohort B, that would be students who would attend on-site Thursdays and Fridays. We're not changing folks' cohorts. They're already assigned. So students who are already attending on site for elementary, they're already used to that Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday AB schedule. So on the top half would be a cohort A. So if I had a third grader at home who was a cohort A student, that schedule at the top is the schedule they would have for the week. So you can see where they're in their classroom instruction at school. They would be having lunch at school, and then they would be traveling home at the end of the day. Wednesdays look very, very similar to how Wednesdays look now. You're going to see that really in every schedule I'm going to show you this evening. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, they have asynchronous learning activities. They do have the opportunity on those days to have a synchronous check-in with their classroom teacher. So they do have direct teacher connection all 5 days of the week based on this proposed schedule. So again, Monday, Tuesday, they're there for nearly a full day. On Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they have a Zoom face-to-face virtually session with their teacher. The bottom section is really just a flip-flopped version. This would be for the cohort B students. So you can see Monday, Tuesday are the at-home days. Wednesday is our normal at-home Wednesday, and Thursday, Fridays in person. Go ahead and go to the next one. It's going to look super similar. So this is for our late start elementary schools. So this would be our West Side elementary schools. It's just a little bit later start time. It means that all the parts and pieces in the schedule just are a little bit later than you saw in the schedule that we just looked at. Everything else is identical. The lengths of time are the same. The order that things happen in continue to be the same as well. I will also point out just in that on the non-cohort days, so for an A student on Thursday and Friday or a B student on Monday and Tuesday, students also would have synchronous sessions for specials. So they have additional teachers that they see on those days that they're at home. And then the next slide is going to show you what a week looks like if my student chooses to do distance learning. So if my same third grader, if we opted for whatever our reason might be as a family that we wanted to stay in distance learning only, then this is what my schedule would look like. This is very similar to the schedule, again, that we had in the fall when everybody was fully at home. So you can see there's a 2-hour session with my teacher every day except for Wednesday. I have asynchronous learning with my afternoon specials. I have an opportunity to get my lunch, and I do have some office hour time where the student or the family can be checking in with the teacher. Wednesdays again look very similar to how Wednesdays look now. This is again the early start school, so you can see that we start the day at 8:20. So whether my third grader goes to school in person or my third grader is going to school over Zoom, we start at 8:20 in the morning for those sessions with my teacher. And then this is the late start school. Late start schools begin their instructional day at 9 o'clock. So again, it is the same whether I'm in person or via Zoom for the distance program.
So Dr. Rodriguez, I've got a question for you. I don't have any kids in school, so I'm not familiar with the whole process, but can you just tell me what asynchronous learning is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We do have a lot of new terms, right? I loved in the video today, one of our principals said all these things that we didn't use these terms years ago, right? Even a year ago. So really there's 3 parts that are happening in our current educational system. We have synchronous learning, which is like what we're doing right now. We're live together, face to face, although virtually. Asynchronous is different in that we wouldn't be on a Zoom call together, but it would be learning activities that my teacher has provided, assigned to me, that I'm working on my own. So that could be a variety of things. It could be video clips, it could be articles to read, it could be math problems, it could be a group project, and I might be on Zoom with my peers working on that assignment together. So asynchronous is all those things that students are working on without the teacher directly there with them. Hopefully that helps.
Well, okay, so that, yeah. I guess my question is this. So this asynchronous learning, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily have to happen during that period of time. And if students have a half hour or hour of asynchronous learning and they get it done in 10 minutes, then they're done, right? I mean, it's nobody's there monitoring them, directing them. This is, you're on your own. Here's some activities.
Yes, to some degree. I think that is accurate, Mr. Christensen. The nice part about asynchronous learning is that it's flexible for families. So families have many reasons why they might choose to do the distance learning options that we're providing. So when it shows you on this example, for example, from 12:55 to 3:30 that I have asynchronous learning, again, I just keep using the third grader example, but any elementary age student, I could be working on those tasks at that time. I also might have something with my family that happens, and I might actually do that time after dinner from 6:30 to 8:30 when my parent is home to help monitor my progress. So it is flexible for families in that work doesn't have to happen at that exact time of day. Students obviously with asynchronous learning could finish sooner or could potentially take longer based upon the tasks that have been given and their current skill level and how much support they need to do that. So I don't anticipate that a student would only have 10 minutes of work to do in that time frame, but certainly students finish in different rates of time, just like they do when we're in person at school.
Is there a consistent expectation? So I see 2.5 hours of asynchronous learning a day here. Is there a consistent expectation from teachers across the district, across schools, that X% of that 2.5 hours is video, X% is a homework package that's sent home, X% is something else? Or is it just freedom of choice from classroom to classroom? One teacher might send a 2.5 hour package for the average student. One teacher might provide 2.5 hours of video. Another teacher might provide 4 hours of a homework package. Or how would parents know what percent of time students are supposed to spend on asynchronous learning by class?
So there is not an exact percentage or amount of time that has been given to our teaching staff as expectations for the various types of activities that can occur within an asynchronous learning block. We have provided a great deal of consistent professional development for our teaching faculty, beginning over really last spring, over the summer, and again through the fall, to talk about what the best models of instruction are in a distance learning model, which includes that asynchronous component. So I do feel that many of our teachers have grown tremendously in this area and have really been able to learn as we've gone through this process around how long does it truly take students to do different types of activities. Certainly we have expectations around that the work is tied to our adopted standards, that we're focusing on the most important learning for students at each grade level. We have built-in time on Wednesdays for professional learning communities, so teachers at a given grade level or at the secondary level in a particular content area regularly meet to talk about the work that students are doing and ensure that they are learning what they need to learn this school year. There's a lot of guidance that's been given through the professional development around things like video. So for example, we would never provide a 3-hour video to a student. Videos are typically very short little snippets. We've invested in additional technology so that teachers can be building those videos for their students and utilizing that. And I've seen many wonderful examples of that from our teachers.
So I think the comments I hear from parents, they're all over the board. Some of them say, you know, my students finishing all their work, not in 2.5 hours a day, in 20 minutes, and they're done with their asynchronous learning. And maybe they're exceptional students, exceptional children, I don't know. And then other parents say, my kid's stressed out. They're getting so much, they're getting this huge homework package and these videos, and they get stressed out and they shut down on asynchronous learning. What is the education that we give to our parents as to how much time the kids should be spending, or is it up to each parent to ask their individual teacher? Should a parent expect 2.5 hours of asynchronous learning on average per day, and much more than that, they need to work that out with their students, teacher, much less than that, the same?
I think teachers are always your best partner as a parent, and if there are concerns that students don't seem to have enough work or that students are overwhelmed by the work that's assigned, I think communicating with your teacher directly is always your first best stop to address those concerns. Our building principals are also available and happy to hear from parents and help support them in they need, and not too much or being stressed. We have school counselors that are available. So certainly if a student is feeling a lot of anxiety or pressure with the at-home assignments, we have a lot of resources to support the student and the family and try and get to the root of what's causing that stress. Is it truly the amount of work? Do they need additional tutoring or support? Or are there other things going on that we could connect them to community resources? So again, I think reaching out to your teacher is always a good idea.
Thank you.
So just one last comment question on this, Dr. Rodriguez. So for example, if a teacher gives a worksheet, I mean, I would guess the expectation is the worksheet is turned back in, or maybe it's not. Is there some accountability for asynchronous learning? In other words, does the student have to mark somewhere that, yes, I watched this video, yes, I did this worksheet, yes, I participated in this activity?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Christensen. So as teachers are assigning tasks, just like we do in an in-person environment, teachers make decisions about which tasks are practice, which things are formative assessment. So they're helping me as a teacher know where you are at individually as a student, which things are summative assessments, which would typically go in the grade book, as we say, and get marked in that kind of more permanent way. There is certainly accountability for the asynchronous learning. Those are real school activities, and there's an expectations from teachers and from our staff that students are engaging in those. If students are not engaging in those, then the teacher would be following up with the student about that missing work. It's just like missing work if we were in person. So I think, again, we can access PowerSchool as parents. It's a great resource to see, at least at the secondary level, how our students are doing on assignments. Again, you can reach out to your student's teacher or teachers if you have any concerns about whether they are keeping up and taking care of things. In terms of for students, teachers are providing feedback. So on many of those tasks, they would be getting feedback from their teacher about how they did on that specific task. So you give an example of a worksheet. So with a worksheet with some sort of questions to answer, reading prompts about a passage or a book, students might even draw a picture related to a story that they read. Depending on what they're learning, right, it's going to dictate what that assignment is. Our kids are actually quite skilled at many of these things, but they take a picture with their smartphone and they send it back to the teacher. They might even hold it up during the Zoom call, during the synchronous session, to show that they did the asynchronous work. Sometimes that work is to prepare for the time that we are together with students. So it could be that we, as a high school student, I might do a reading and then we're going to have a conversation during the Zoom. Teacher's going to know whether I read it by whether I engage in the chat session or the live discussion session. So again, I do believe that there is accountability built into the system for students to do the tasks.
Jenny, can you explain the late start and the early start again? I don't know if I missed that, or can you explain?
Yep, I'd be happy to, President Phillips. So we have, for long before COVID, had different start times across our elementary system. So this is not due to COVID. This is just a part of Pasco School District. We have so many elementary schools and so many buses, and to make all the transportation and all the things work, we have two different start times for elementary. So our early start schools tend to be on the east side and central part of town. Our late start schools tend to be on the west side of town. Again, this has everything to do with transportation routes and buses. So before COVID, if I went to an early start elementary school, my school day started at 8:20 in the morning. And if I went to a late start elementary school, my school day started at 9:00 a.m. So we are just returning people to normal on this one little piece that we can. All right, I'm going to move on to middle school. So we're going to talk a little bit about the middle school path forward. And you're going to see this looks very, very similar to what we just talked about with elementary in terms of the path forward and the options for families. So the messaging that went out yesterday from our public affairs office also went to middle school families. They have the 3 same options as elementary school families. So again, they can select to participate going forward in our blended in-person model. They can select to remain in a fully distance learning model, or again, at any time they can choose to transfer to our iPal program if desired. We have the same timeline for asking families to make a commitment for the rest of this year. So again, by this Friday, January 29th, we are asking our middle school families to opt in to one of those models. Again, it's for the rest of the year. You let us know through filling out the online form. If we do not hear from you via the online form, someone from your middle school will be calling you. They'll be contacting you in every way possible to find out what you would prefer to do. Just like elementary, if after multiple attempts we cannot reach you, we will assign your middle school child to the model that most closely aligns with current enrollment or with what we know that you've expressed in previous surveys or contacts that we've made. Again, if you select the blended in-person learning model, we will ask parents to also click through and do that trimester 3 COVID-19 screening attestation at the same time so that you won't have to hop back on and do that later. The timeline, which you're going to see on the next slide, is again very similar to the elementary model. So we are right now in the preparation phase. So last time when we met with you, we had just gotten the notice from Ben Franklin Health District. So since our last board meeting 2 weeks ago, we reviewed that updated written guidance. We made a decision at the middle level. We wanted to follow the same model selection process that we are implementing at the elementary level. We have communicated out to our middle school families and again are asking them to make that choice by this Friday. We are continuing to bargain with our labor partners. Beginning in February, we are looking at that implementation of really initiating a staff process. Didn't explain that in detail with the elementary slide, but basically based on the number of families that select blended learning, we would be identifying the number of at-home learning, distance learning. We'll be identifying the number of teachers that we need to be full-time distance teachers. And we would go through that process of getting them in place and assigning students according to their family choice enrollment, so that teacher movement and preparation. And then again, beginning February 15th, everyone would be where they need to be. Middle school students would begin in one of those identified models. We are looking at and have proposed that 6th and 7th grade would have that first in-person instruction day on February 18th. So we would shift to the new models on February 15th. That is a holiday, it's President's Day, and we have a few other things happening that week. So the first day students would be physically on campus would be Thursday, February 18th for 6th and 7th grade. They are new to all of our middle schools. And then the following week, 8th graders would join them again, beginning on February 25th. I'm going to share with you some schedules. Again, these are what it would look like as a student. And because at the middle level, we have schedules that are really set up based on grade level groupings. We call them houses at the middle school level. So those who are tuned in watching, if you're from middle school, we know this as a house. So the 6th grade house has a schedule, the 7th grade house has a schedule, 8th grade house. So again, at the top, you're going to see cohort A. So folks already know usually if their students assigned to A or B. So the top section there is cohort A students, the bottom section is cohort B. This is again, if I am a 6th grader and I am planning to go to school in person. So I'm in person a couple of mornings a week. I have my at-home pieces in the afternoon. Those actually occur 4 days a week. And I do have a short enhancement class period on Wednesday. So as a blended learning student, I'm going to see teachers physically in the same place at school 2 days a week. I'm going to also see teachers virtually all 5 days a week. The next slide is going to show you 7th grade. There is not much difference as a 7th grader. What changes is in the afternoon, the time that I have my related arts is different. So our related arts teachers really rotate through. They have 6th graders at one time slot, 7th graders at another time slot, 8th graders at another time slot. That's how it works in the pre-COVID normal schedule as well. So that's what that looks like there for 7th grade. And then the next slide is going to show you 8th grade. So if I have an 8th grader, this would be their schedule as well. Again, these 3 that we've just walked through, these are for families who select the blended in-person learning option. Again, it is blended, so it is a combination of in-person and also the distance virtual learning. So again, students who are doing blended at middle school, they're going to be on site with their core teachers, math, science, social studies, and English language arts. And then they're going to be doing virtual for related arts, advisory, and enhancement. The next 3 slides are going to walk you through if I choose as a family to have my student do distance learning only. So again, families have many reasons why they might opt for that. But if I'd like to stay connected to my middle school versus doing a transfer to the IPAL program, I can do that through this distance learning model. And what you'll see here is it's actually very, very similar. So the difference is that I'm going to see my core teachers Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, where if I was an in-person, I'm only seeing them Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, to ensure that the time is equitable between our in-person and our at-home students. It's actually the exact same amount of minutes. So in the distance learning, you can see it says synchronous class. So I'm like we are this evening, I'm Zooming with my kids, with my teacher. And then there is some flexible support time that distance learning teacher could use to work with students in a small group, one-on-one, could do some repeat assessments. Time could be used in a lot of different ways, but for that direct instruction piece, you can see it's a 40-minute, and then there's flexible support, and then they have their next class for 40 minutes and flexible support. So the times all line up for middle school, which actually is quite nice, between our distance learning and our blended learning families and our kids. So students really are on that same schedule. Teachers are on a very similar schedule in either model as well. So this is 6th grade. The next one is 7th grade. Again, the only thing that really changes is in the afternoon where that related arts falls. And then the final middle school one is 8th grade. One of the other nice features of this proposed schedule is that students who are in the in-person or in the at-home model get to be together still in their related arts, advisory, and enhancement classes in the afternoon, so they get to maintain that peer connection across those 2 different groups of students at the middle level. So I'll pause for a moment before we go on to high school. Were there any questions I could answer about middle school?
Okay, so maybe I'm overthinking this, but if you go to the middle school again, you've got 2 blocks, 2 days. The asynchronous learning, are those activities supporting those 2 blocks? The related arts, or are they something completely different? Do you understand my question?
I think so, but you can let me know if I don't answer what you're actually asking. So in the afternoon, so I'm just looking at this top cohort A, and I see as a 6th grader, I have my related arts class from 12:20 to 1. But from 1:05 to 1:45, it says asynchronous. And right before that, from 11:35 to 12:15, it says asynchronous. That would be time that I am doing learning for my core teachers. So in the morning, I am seeing my English language arts social studies teacher. I'm seeing my math science teacher. At 6th grade, we have a block schedule. So those really are just 2 teachers for those 4 content areas. And they would also be giving me some work to do during my asynchronous time.
Yeah, and then you switch over to Thursday and Friday at home. I'm assuming that there's more asynchronous learning there. I'm assuming that's again in support of your block classes that you've had Monday and Tuesday, or if you're Monday, Tuesday at home, then it's Thursday, Friday block classes. So a lot of asynchronous learning in support of those 2 block classes that you had the 2 days a week.
I would anticipate that our related arts teachers might also have some asynchronous learning activities for our students, so that on those 2 long days at home, that I would have some work to do for each of my teachers.
Is there a reason we are not going back for lunch yet? I know some of the other schools in the area are. Our numbers are pretty similar, at least the last ones that I have checked. Or is this just a slow transition time? Do we have a plan to go back to lunch? Or is there not enough room for the 6 feet apart, everybody face the same way? I would love to know the reasoning behind it.
Sure, we had not planned to do meals on site at the secondary level initial health guidance was that we weren't ready to do that yet at the secondary level. And we do have obviously much larger schools. So it does create some real challenges to being able to follow all the mitigation strategies in the lunchroom at the secondary schools. We also are looking at making sure there's time really in the day for kids to get home in order to do those related arts classes. Many of the activities that happen in those related arts classes are not things that we currently can do on site in person under current health guidance, such as choir, wind instruments. Even something like PE looks really different in person right now than it normally would. So we felt it was a better option to maintain those related arts classes in a distance virtual model.
So is this the plan through the end of the year? Are we not ever going to go back to having lunch on campus at all the rest of the year?
These schedules are proposed to get us through the end of the school year, yes.
Are we concerned at all at the limited amount of time, especially our middle schoolers are in school? You know, they have less instruction in the whole entire week than they are getting in you know 2 days of instruction from what I see. I'm concerned about that. Our middle schools are getting the least amount, and I don't know, is there any way to get them more instruction and more?
So in terms of looking at direct instruction between teachers and students, when we take a look at this schedule and look at both the in-person core instruction and the direct synchronous instruction through a distance virtual model with related arts teachers, our enhancement class, which is either an extension or a support class for our middle school kids, and our advisory programming, our students actually, I believe, are getting direct instruction with teachers that is comparable to students at other levels and comparable to students across our region and in other districts.
So I have a comment related to that, and I dug a little deeper. I have a niece and nephew in Kennewick, and I talked to my sister-in-law and was asking what they were doing. And then I looked on Kennewick's schedule that's posted online as well, and I see that their middle schoolers are going much like us, you know, days a week, AB shift, but they're going from 8 until 12:45, and they're not serving lunch just like us. So they're getting 4 hours and 45 minutes days a week, in-person core instruction, you know, so that's 9.5 hours a week. Whereas with this proposed schedule, our kids are getting 2 hours and 50 minutes 2 days a week for 5 hours and 40 minutes. So there's a difference of 4 hours, or almost 50% difference between Kennewick. And then digging a little deeper, looking at Richland, they're serving lunch. I'm not proposing we do that, but they're getting their kids in there 6 hours, 2 days a week for learning. So they're getting 12 hours. There's such a vast discrepancy there. And I hear what you're saying about we're providing some asynchronous opportunities, but from a lot of people that want to send their kids to school, they've voiced that asynchronous learning may not be as efficient for their children as the synchronous in-person learning. And so what would we say to those people? Is there a reason why we couldn't expand our middle school block, you know, till 12:30 each day? I think many parents would be willing to feed their kids at home and give up, you know, an asynchronous learning block there in exchange for having an amount of time that's equivalent to our other locals.
So I appreciate the feedback. And I guess I want to just clarify in the schedule that we're looking at on the screen right now. In addition to the asynchronous learning opportunities, there are synchronous direct teacher instruction sessions built into this schedule as well. And while that's not on site, it is timed directly between the student and the teacher. So you can see, for example, on Monday in the cohort A, there's a related arts class that students are attending for 40 minutes. there's also an advisory session that's occurring for 30 minutes. So there's an additional 70 minutes of direct instruction time with their teachers.
And I think that's important. I think that's important as well, but why not give them the other 2 hours in their core courses 2 days a week in person, take out some asynchronous learning time, and we could still provide that. That's 40 minutes of synchronous learning in related arts 2 days a week. Couldn't that be done another time later in the day, or on an asynchronous period on Wednesday? You know, it feels like there's a lot of flexibility, and it's hard to explain, and maybe the general community hasn't seen it yet, but if we get 3-4 weeks down the road and people see that discrepancy of 12 hours of in-person in this district, 9.5 in that district, and 5 hours and 40 minutes in ours, I think that there will be some people that would like to see it. And we know we don't want to switch up again before the end of the year. So I'd like to see us stretch that core course time to be equivalent to the other districts in person, and still provide the related arts, you know, later in the day. Cut some asynchronous learning if we need to.
I certainly understand where you're coming from, Mr. Lehrman. I just want to reiterate that when we consider the direct instruction from teachers, both in person and synchronously, it's actually nearly 11 hours a week, which I do believe is comparable to what you're talking about. The challenge also is around that our related arts classes are not combined 6, 7, 8. So when you look at the schedule for 6th graders, at 11:35 time slot where it says asynchronous for 6th grade, our related arts teachers are instructing our 7th graders at that time. The asynchronous slot at 1:05 is when our related arts teachers are instructing our 8th grade students. So it's
I think
all the parts and pieces for all the students.
I understand that. I think we can tweak this, and if we want to make it more similar to the other districts, if we believe as a board, a community, and a district that, as many of our consumers have said, an hour of asynchronous is not equivalent to an hour of synchronous for many students and parents. So just adding those two together and saying it's equivalent to the other districts, I don't know that flies with.
Again, I'm not talking about asynchronous learning. I'm talking about synchronous learning.
Okay, let me rephrase. Synchronous remote Zoom classes, it is not the same for some of these people as being in class and getting the in-person instruction.
So we're happy to take it back and take a look at it again. Certainly, again, there is the challenge of making sure students have time to get home via bus, via walking, an opportunity to eat their lunch before those related arts classes. We also really want to ensure that students have a quality related arts experience. And we would have to shorten all of those times in order to link the core class time mornings.
And I'm one board member. It would take obviously more board members than myself to have you go take a look at it and change it. But I would support, and it's hard for me to support this in being so vastly different in in-person core curriculum as the other districts.
So, Dr. Rodriguez, I've got maybe a similar question. I'm looking at middle school, and I'm looking at the distance learning. I mean, take any grade versus the blended learning. So if I'm doing blended learning, I've got block 1 and block 2, 2 days a week. If I'm doing distance learning, I've got block 1 and block 2, 4 days a week. And so I look at that. So I'm assuming, again, I don't know what all of these mean. I'm just assuming that block 1 is the same thing, whether you're distance or blended. So these guys are actually getting the distance learners are getting teacher instruction 4 days a week, whereas if you choose to go blended, you're going to get direct teacher instruction 2 days a week, and then you're going to be asynchronous the other 2 days, assuming and presumably working on the blocks. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution is. I just look at that and I think, man, there's some benefit to being asynchronous if teacher contact time, albeit Zoom, is important to you. So I don't know if there's a way to balance that. And again, just an observation from my part. I'm not sure it's good or bad. Certainly 2 days a week in class versus 4 days a week in Zoom is different. So, but just an observation.
Yeah, thank you for that. It does have the 4 days. The time is cut in half, although there is the opportunity for that additional flexible support time. But the contact minutes for the direct instruction are identical. So it's 2 80-minute blocks or it's the 4 40-minute blocks, just to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And seeing the flexible time, I mean, to me, that's even better because now I get one-on-one support. If I don't need it, that's great. I can go on at my own pace. So for me, I think that would be a real challenge to decide whether I want to send my kids back to school for 2 days of in-class learning versus with 2 days of asynchronous or 4 days of, it's Zoom, but you've got a teacher there instructing. And believe me, I am glad you're doing this. This would be a real challenge. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind, we're trying to accommodate both our distance learners as well as our in-school learners. We have people in our community who want to do both. This is not easy, and we're not going to come up with something perfect. So I appreciate your work. I just make these observations. Just hopefully they're helpful.
So Board President Phillips, we're hearing one board member request that Jenny go back and sharpen her pencil around this work. We would need at least 3 of you on the board to give Jenny that direction for us to move forward with that. So do you want to facilitate that direction now, or would you like to do it at the end?
I would. I still have some questions too. I'm just looking at I'm still concerned about the amount of hours, especially if we're doing this for the whole rest of the year. Our kids have have had a very limited instruction, and I want to give them as much as they can. I notice, we have asynchronous learning at 2 different times during the day, and it just seems like we could stretch this day out a little bit, give the kids, 50, 55 minutes in block for each of their classes in block 1, 50, 55 minutes for each of their classes in block 2. And go into that, we have quite a bit of time for office hours, lunch break, and then asynchronous learning. That's a big block of time that seems like could be utilized. And then we have asynchronous learning at the bottom again. And our teachers have time to prepare and stuff on Wednesdays. They would still have time to prepare on Monday and Tuesday, and they should still have a prep hour, which would give them some extra time. It feels like we can get our kids back a little bit more. I know we're on a timeline, so I guess we can facilitate that instruction. I am concerned about the amount of time that they are at school. So I would love to know what the other board members feel about this. Do we want her to go sharpen the pencil around this, or are we good with moving on?
President Phillips, I just would like to again share that those 2 asynchronous blocks you're seeing in the afternoon are the related arts classes for the other grade levels. So those teachers are already teaching in those time slots. And that is the time that the core teachers who have the students in the morning, either synchronously via Zoom for the distance learner or in person at school for the blended learning, those teachers are doing their planning in the afternoon. The related arts teachers are doing their planning in the morning. Certainly office hours, if that's not something that is important to maintain, is time that could go elsewhere. The lunch break is 30 minutes, which is our standard lunch period. And again, that office hour time slot is for the students who are on site to get home so that they can be a part of those related arts classes with their distance learning peers. So I just want to ensure that everyone understands why those pieces are there.
So they're teaching on those times, they are teaching the other grade levels. So these teachers, what are these related art classes?
Can we go back to the other schedule if we're going to talk to that, right? Don't we want to look at the in-person?
It's identical for both. So it's, we can look at either one that makes sense for you guys, but that afternoon is the same, whether I'm a distance learning or whether I am an in-person student, because the related arts are at home. Related arts at the middle school includes choir, band, orchestra, our career technical education classes, like engineering, Microsoft Office, family consumer science. It's also PE and health. So those are all the types of courses that are happening during that time of day for students.
So on Monday and Tuesday, after, just as an example, after the block 1 and block 2 teachers are done teaching at 10:30, if we were to adopt something closer to, say, Kennewick can go to 12:30 or 12:45, what are those teachers doing? If I go down and look at the at-home students, they all have asynchronous learning during that time.
So teachers during that time when the meal pickup and the traveling home is happening for the kids, the core teachers actually have office hours in their schedule so that they can meet with students who are in the opposite cohort who might need assistance with their asynchronous assignments. So on Monday, during that meal pickup time, those same core teachers from the morning actually have time with the B cohort students who are having their at-home days on that day. So they're actually still working with students at that time. And then they do have their lunch break, obviously, after that. And then at the middle school level, we have also a variety of teaming things that occur. We have some time for teachers to be preparing those asynchronous lessons that the students are doing at those other asynchronous learning time slots. And then teachers actually get back with kids at the end of the school day for students for advisory and enhancement classes. So every teacher, both core teachers and related arts teachers, are assigned advisory and enhancement classes. So every single teacher is teaching directly with students at that time.
So if we were able to survey everybody and these parents and students said, yeah, I'd like to go to 12:30 or 12:45, our real response would probably be, okay, well, you'll probably lose your asynchronous time on Thursday and Friday, because we have to lose asynchronous time, right? And my gut feel is that the majority of parents who are sending their kids to school here would say, okay, that's okay. I have a middle schooler at home. He may be atypical, but there's not 100% or even a majority of percent asynchronous learning time that he's been having classroom hours and getting help from teachers. Again, maybe he's atypical, but I've heard other parents say the same thing, is my kids don't use all that asynchronous and office hour time. I wish that they were getting, core instruction from their teacher during that time period. So I understand it'd be giving up some asynchronous time, but my gut feel is the majority, not all, but the majority of parents and students would give that up in order to have a longer in-person core contact time.
And we would also have to give up related arts time. So for example, if we went to 12:45 with core, students are going to grab their lunch, catch their bus, head home, probably have to eat while they get onto Zoom, and that's okay, I suppose. So 1:30ish maybe. The middle school day for students ends at 2:20. That is our normal end time for middle school students. So you're talking about having less than an hour to fit in their related arts classes at 3 separate grade levels, and their enhancement course and their advisory course.
Could they attend the related arts on Thursday or Friday, or on their opposite cohort day? If I'm going to school on Monday and Tuesday, I guess you're saying I have related arts every day in this schedule?
Yes, you do, because students are assigned to 2 different related arts classes. So 2 afternoons a week, they go to their related arts A, and 2 afternoons they go to their related arts B. So for many students, that might mean like my PE and I might have a music class, or it might be my PE and I have a CTE class.
So what if I went to school till 12:45, rode the bus home? Right now we have an hour block for that and meals. I'm home by 1:45, and from 1:45-ish, or we can tweak the schedule a little bit till I fit in my related arts at that point. Does it not fit?
So it would be less time than we have proposed in this schedule, which is, again, I think based on wanting to really provide a quality experience and based on the time that our related arts teachers have shared is a functional amount of time for them to do their lessons. It also would mean eliminating our advisory program where we do our character strong social emotional learning components and our high school beyond planning career preparation components, as well as our enhancement classes, which is where many students receive their support services for language development. It's also an enrichment and extension opportunity for many of our highly capable students. So those pieces would no longer fit into the schedule.
And we're creative, and we have Wednesday with what, 3 blocks of asynchronous learning right now. I would guess we could fit some of that in maybe on Wednesday.
So the related arts are they doing that synchronous learning at home for the related arts every day? Do the kids log on at 1:05 every single day to do the same class?
So again, they're assigned to 2 classes, but yes, every day as a 6th grade student at 1:05, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I have a related arts class directly with my teacher. 2 days a week, it's one class. The other 2 days, it's my other class, because all students have 2 different related arts classes assigned to them.
Yeah, and I don't feel good about shortening that. If we can cut into the asynchronous learning time in one way, shape, or form, it's tough because none of those teachers are teaching in the morning. I just don't know. It would just be really nice if our kids could go from 7:20 to noon to school instead of 10:35. I feel like we're taking a small little section of their morning and giving them school. It's tough, and then they have to go home and get back online. And I realize that they need those. Maybe those teachers aren't teaching in the mornings. Maybe they can have those classes in the mornings on their days at home, so that we can have more time for that, because that makes sense that they could teach their synchronous classes on the days that they're already home, so we can get more instruction on the days. I know this is tough. I know you've worked really hard on this, and I'm not trying to be critical. I just want to give our kids, this is going to go through the end of the year, I want to give our kids what we can, the best that we can. But we do, if we're going to have her go back and look at this again, we do need to find out what the other board members, if you think this is adequate, then we need to find out what the other 3 board members feel.
Well, I think that if we use until noon. So if we had from the section to, because goes to 12:15. If we had the 3rd block go until noon, I mean, that's adding a significant time to that and giving up that first the first learning section there. So if they went till noon, then they could go home. That would give them a section to go home for lunch. I don't think going until 12:45, that's cutting a lot of time out. But if they went until noon, that would give another learning block in there.
Steve and Jesse, do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, so I'm looking at this. Honestly, I don't see any other way to do it without completely rearranging it. I understand Scott's desire to get more in-time or in-school instruction time, but the way that the related arts is set up, I mean, you'd have to extend it all day to catch them all, and you would have 2 dead periods while they're sitting at school, or you would have to cram them all into a single hour, and you just can't do that. So I don't know enough to help this. I mean, I understand the desire to get everybody in school, but or more time in school. I don't want to spend a lot of trying to refigure this, because it looks to me like our middle school schedule is just set up, but this is the way it is. I don't know what Kennewick does. I don't know what Richland does, but it looks to me like we would be revamping our entire education system, our middle school instruction, to accommodate more time at school. So from what I understand, I can see why it's set up this way, and so I don't know enough to say spend more time trying to rearrange it, because to me it looks like we would be rearranging our entire instruction model at the middle school level. So I'm okay with this, unless in one day you can come up with a schedule that works.
I echo Mr. Christensen on that. I think if we can dissect this all we want, but I think Dr. Rodriguez, this is a fair schedule, and we also have to think we're going to crush this schedule. We got to think about the teachers as well, and their time and their efforts, and crunching all these time is going to be hard for teachers, and so we have to think about them too. And I think this schedule is good, and I think Dr. Rodriguez and her team did a well job on this. And I know that in-person instruction is the best, but given that we are in the middle of COVID pandemic, I don't think we can do what we want to do for the safety and well-being of everybody. But other than that, I echo Mr. Christensen, and I think this is the best that we can do for right now. And of course, we want more in-person schedule or in-person learning, but right now it's hard. And I think this is something, without putting more pressure and sacrifices on our teachers, I think this is good.
Well, there are 3 people that would like you to go back and see if we can get some more time. You know, the teachers that are doing the block time are different than the teachers that are doing the related arts, and having them do that synchronous learning on days that they're already home in the mornings might work to free up that time and have those teachers teach then. I mean, it would just, obviously Kennewick did it. They're going a lot longer. Not that we have to do what Kennewick's doing, but from what I see, the teachers have a lot of prep time because their afternoons are much more free because they're different teachers teaching, and they have all day Wednesdays. So I don't know. I feel like we can get our kids in longer. I feel like that's what's best for our kids after not having school for almost a year. So I don't know. There's 3 people. I would love to do that. We might have to call a special board meeting if you need action on this. Michelle? Superintendent Whitney?
You technically do not approve our schedules or academic programs like this. Certainly we want to partner with the board and you to be supportive of our work. We would just need to make sure you're supportive of our path forward, but you would not be taking action on the schedules. We will be asking you or giving you the option to take action on timelines tonight, but not on schedules. So.
Okay. Well, there's 3 that want you to. I guess you guys decide that. The district staff decides whether or not they want to go and change those timelines at all. Especially anyway.
So three of you have given us direction to go back and sharpen our pencil around the hours of in-person time. So that is what district staff will do. We'll go back and take a look at it to see what we can do around the in-person time. So that's the direction that I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Thank you. Yeah, that's the direction that is an accurate assessment. We do appreciate your work. We realize this is a lot of work, and we appreciate all you do. So we'll turn the time back over to you. Dr. Rodriguez for the rest of the presentation.
Sure. So I'll be happy to also talk about the high school. I do just, we'll get back to you as soon as we can come up with some potential other options. Just please know that that may impact our ability to meet the timeline that we suggested this evening. So I'm going to move on to the high school path forward. High school looks a little bit different.
Sorry, I want to make just one comment here. So I recognize that 3 board members have spoken up on this. I think we do need to be careful. I don't know how much time you plan to spend. I would like a deadline, because we've already heard from some of our teachers that, well, one tonight expressed concern that these things are coming and they seem like they are ill prepared. Now, that could be somebody's personal opinion, but I think the more time we spend monkeying with this, the less time we have to be prepared when we roll this out. So I don't know what the expectation is, other than go and look at it. If that's an hour, if that's a day, if that's a week, I think we need to put a deadline on whatever you're going to do, so that we don't spend a lot of time reinventing this. Is that fair?
No, I agree. I don't think we want to affect the timeline of getting our kids back in school. I think it's important that we do that. So, and I don't know how Scott and Sherry feel about that, but I do feel like we need to adhere to the timeline. So whatever work you can do, reorganizing that in that timeline, keep it within that timeline. If it's impossible, I don't want to reduce the time of our related arts. I would love to just rearrange the schedule and have that synchronous time happen when they are doing synchronous learning at home. And then there's at school days be at school. So, do what works.
I don't want to impact the timeline. I liked Sherry's recommendation to look at an option where you just get rid of the one asynchronous class, understanding that people are going to lose that, and then leaving the have it done by noon and leaving the arts in place. It seems like I want to make it simpler than it is. I respect all the work you guys do. Understand it's totally difficult. So thank you for doing what you do. But anything you can do, and then, like we said before, in a day or so, and let us know what that looks like, it's much appreciated.
So I can't, not to belabor this point, but I will belabor the point. When are we going to wait till next board meeting to get this back to us? How are we going to know what's acceptable? Do we need to meet Thursday after they've had a couple of days to look at it? I don't want to wait till next board meeting to have them say we couldn't find anything different and have 3 board members upset. So I think we need to
an update to you on what I can come up with by the end of the week, if that would be amenable to the board.
That would be great. And would you need any feedback from us or not?
We will give Jenny a couple of days to take a look at it, and then I'll be in contact with board officers by the end of the week to formulate a plan.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to high school.
Dr. Rodriguez, I thank you for everything. And so I just want to tell you that we appreciate you and everything work. And I think this is a good schedule. And I don't want to prolong our timeline, but I just wanted to reiterate that you're awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Campos. I appreciate that. Okay, so high school. High school looks different. So you saw in our elementary and middle school path forward that we are looking at the same 3 models, same general timeline proposed, same communications to parents. High school is different altogether. And really that is due to the unique nature of high school. So looking at having wholly separate blended model and distance model, where students and families opt into one or the other, and we reorganize our teaching staff and reschedule all of our students, is just not feasible at the high school level. There is just a level of complexity of individualized student course requests that occur. As you know, our high schools are very large, approximately 2,400 students at Pasco High, almost 3,000, right around 3,000 at Chihuahua High School. So reassigning schedules for that many students under the roof of one building is a monumental task in the best of times. We also really need to ensure that any high school student can pursue their course of study that they have set up in alignment with their high school and beyond plan, and that they can meet their graduation requirements. We also have the added level of complexity that at the high school level, teachers are endorsed by a specific content or even course designation. So for example, even in science, a science teacher is not a science teacher at the high school level. You are separately endorsed to be a chemistry teacher or a biology teacher or a physics teacher. So the ability to be able to duplicate the breadth of offerings that we have at the high school into 2 full models is not something that we are able to do. Additionally to the content designations, we have a number of courses that are college in the high school or other dual credit. All of those courses occur only through agreement and articulation with our higher education partners, and they must be taught by the teachers that are approved to do those classes. And we want to ensure that students, whether they want to be on site or need to be at home, have the opportunity to continue in that coursework. So we have proposed a model where students would choose to attend either in person or distance sessions for their classes as scheduled each week. If I've opted in for in-person and I'm a cohort A student, I would be going to my classes on Mondays and Tuesdays in the mornings. If I'm a cohort B student who's opting into in-person, I would be going on campus for my classes Thursday and Fridays in the mornings. And if I have selected to be a distance student, I'm combined together with my A and B colleagues, and I attend my sessions in the afternoons, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Advisory and intervention classes, those would continue to be virtual for all students, a little bit akin to the related arts conversation of our middle school. And that is built into the PM schedule so that whether I'm an in-person student who is on site a couple of days a week or a distance learning student who's at home the whole week, I am able to be home to attend those virtual classes. The nice thing about this path forward for high school is that students and families have the flexibility to switch between the options as needed as we travel through the rest of this year. So for whatever reason, if a student needs to shift, they would be able to shift week to week because again, we're not reassigning student and teacher schedules. I'm going to share with you the timeline that we have proposed for high school. It's on the next slide. Oh, I just kidding. I was going to give you an athletics update first. So athletics path forward, and then we'll jump into the high school timeline. We had a request from the board to share an athletics update with you this evening. So we had additional guidance provided by the WIAA last week. We got some guidance on Tuesday, the 19th. We got additional guidance on Wednesday, the 20th. They have determined that high school season dates are revised. I've listed those for you here. You can see that our fall sports are beginning on Monday. So in less than a week, we are open for fall sports. So that begins on February 1st. It would be all of our normal fall sports with one exception. You can see under winter sports there, I've added girls swimming. So typically that is a fall sport that has been moved by our local league to the winter sports season, which actually will happen in the spring this year. So they have reordered our seasons. We're going to start with fall. That, as you can see, is really February, March. We will then move into our spring sports. That will happen from mid-March through the start of May. And then finally, we will end the year with winter sports and starting right at the end of April and going really right up to the very end of our school year. There are practices permitted. So within those season dates, we can have practice. There's lots and lots of guidance around mitigation strategies that we have to follow and have been following through our open season practices that we've had at our comprehensive high schools over the past couple of months. Whether or not you can have a contest and a game is dependent on 3 things. First of all, what phase are you in through our Washington regional phases? You heard Superintendent Whitney and Dr. Person talk earlier about we're in the South Central region. We're currently in phase 1, as are all of the regions in the state of Washington at this time. It's also dependent upon the risk level of the activity. Obviously, there is higher concerns for a high risk activity where there's more contact, more physical contact versus a low risk activity. So for example, football is a high risk activity. Cross country, where I run by myself and don't really touch any shared equipment or those kinds of things is a low risk activity. The other primary factor in determining whether contests can be held is the location of the event. Is this a sport that can occur outside where we have fabulous air circulation, or is this an event that occurs indoors in an enclosed environment? So under phase one, practices are permitted for all sports in one form or another. Sometimes there are more restrictions, but we're able to do some things. In phase one, cross country is the only of our fall sports that will be permitted to have contests or to have meets. Once we move as a region to phase two, then we would be able to add contests for the other fall sports that are going to be starting with practices next week. Spectators is another component. There are no spectators permitted during phase one. Once we move to phase two, then there could be some spectators, but it is very, very limited. So we are in the process of planning to live stream any and all of our high school contests, events, games that we are able to hold. So should we be in a position to have those, we will be planning to live stream those. I think at this time we are not planning to live stream cross country, really because you don't see much. You must see the kids run by for a second or two, but wouldn't be a very exciting live stream event. But certainly we will cheer them on in spirit and be excited to see photos and those kinds of things after their events. At the middle school level, we are very, very hopeful and planning to have our season 2, season 3, season 4. We are planning for middle school athletics to begin as soon as we have middle school students on site for instructional purposes. So we have a lot of things in place. We've been busy hiring coaches for our brand new Reynolds Middle School. So big thank you to our athletic directors who have been instrumental in preparing us to be ready to offer sports for our students. And now I'm going to share the timeline with you.
Question on sports access. I assume that everyone's, as long as their grades are meet the minimum requirements, is eligible. Is there any requirements that you must be enrolled in in-person learning?
There is not an agreement around which model you select. So students and families are again free to choose from the models that are available for their specific level. And that really has no bearing on whether they choose to turn out for athletics and sports or not. We have a long-standing tradition of having a no-cut policy at the middle school. So any middle school students in the 7th and 8th grade, because that is when athletics begin, is in 7th grade, are encouraged to participate in our athletics programs. At the high school, we do have a tryout process. We have a certain number of teams. And so certainly we're going to continue to follow that, which has been our protocol in previous years.
Thank you.
I have a question that kind of goes back to earlier, but the fall sports reminded me because all of our students can participate. iPals is great. It has lots of different things that you can do, but there are limited amounts of courses that you can take. So are we going to have some of those courses that you can't get at iPals? Are the students still going to be able to take those at the high school and middle school level?
You threw me for a minute there, Board President Phillips, because
Choir, they don't have choir and iPal. They don't have hands-on art. A lot of the arts, actually, a lot of the arts that they might have in a different way, like an art history class, but not an applied arts, that some of these iPal students usually can go to the high school and get.
Yeah, so high school is a little different when it comes to iPal. iPal as a standalone school is a K-8 school. We offer iPal course enrollment for our high school students, but they remain and continue to be Chiawana High School or Pasco High School students. So they remain assigned to their counselor at their comprehensive high school. They can have split enrollment, so they could have a full-time schedule at their home high school and then still take an iPal class. They could take all iPal and do one class at their home high school with the schedule that I'm going to show you in just a few moments. With the high school, again, they have the option to either be in person or distance. And really either one of those schedules would fit in with a part-time single class, multi-class iPal schedule. So at the high school level, that's how iPal functions. With our comprehensive high schools, it's really a partnership program between the two schools that the students do. At the middle school level, students really are choosing either to be a part of their boundaried middle school or to be a part of the iPal program. Again, at the middle level, we've developed schedules and a plan that would allow families to either do the blended, which includes both in-person and synchronous and asynchronous learning, or they have the option to remain with their home middle school and do the distance learning model with teachers from their middle school and continuing with their related arts classes virtually, like all middle school students in the schedule, or they have the option to go to the IPAL program, which does look a little different. I do believe we have worked with families on a case-by-case basis if, for example, like they wanted to take band. So again.
And will they continue to do that? Or because I think you're going to have a lot of families in the IPAL that are going to want to continue things like band or choir or those various things, or do we just not have the time to do a case-by-case basis right now?
I think we have largely tried to encourage families to opt into one or the other. I also believe we still have families that probably have more individualized schedules. And I would really encourage families who have questions about that to contact the IPAL program directly.
A quick question on sports. So these seasons are super condensed. And I know typically there's a minimum number of practices before they can participate in these sports. Do you know if that has been reduced as well so that they can get competing as early as they possibly can?
They are reduced season lengths. So I believe it's now like about a 7-week endeavor, where normally it's about a 10-week endeavor. They also have really eliminated sort of the district's playoff state level competition structure. There is 1 week, which is the last week of each of these seasons, that's designated for an end of season activity, contest, celebration. I don't know that we know exactly what that's going to look like. Again, we continue to get revised guidance from WIAA on an almost weekly basis. And so there will be some sort of regional probably event that last week of each of these seasons that's listed. There are expectations still for practices before contests. I don't think we're going to have any difficulty doing what we need to do to meet those requirements. So if we are not having a contest, it's going to be because we're not in the right phase and have permission really to do that. We will be fully prepared to have contests at such time as we're permitted to do so under the health rules and the governor's orders. Okay, so moving on to the high school accelerated timeline proposal recommendation. So like the other levels that I've spoken with you about this evening, like middle school, we got written guidance the night of the board meeting last time. So we have reviewed that written guidance from Ben Franklin Health District. We continued exploring and completed our exploration of the split day schedule to include both in-person and at-home instruction. That allowed us to really identify what the program options would be at high school. And unlike elementary and middle, there will not be a fully, completely separate, reassigned, restructured distance learning program. It's a single schedule that will meet the needs of both sets of students and families so that we can do our best to serve both of those populations. Again, IPAL continues to be an option, as we just spoke about. We have communicated information out to parents about the proposed timeline and schedules for high school. High school families do not need to go on and do the enrollment form because again, you'll have the ability to just opt into whichever one will work for your student. And again, we are continuing to communicate, collaborate, and bargain with our labor partners over all of the things. Beginning in February, for particularly our high school staff, because we're not going to have a wholly separate distance learning model, we do recognize that for some high school teachers, they may need to go through an accommodation process based on their personal health needs. So employee services will be working through that in early February for those staff who are impacted in that way. Teachers would be preparing for the transition to the new schedule. Again, continuing to communicate with our parents about that. If there are families who are interested in a move to IPAL, we really encourage you to contact IPAL now and get registered now for trimester 3. And then just finalizing our facility preparations to return more students back to our high school campuses. And then the transition, the targeted date that we're looking at for high school would be Monday, February 22nd. That's just 1 week after we are bringing back lots and lots of other folks across the district. We would start that first date with 9th grade students, and then our 10th, 11th, and 12th graded students would start shortly after. This timeline is ambitious. It does, however, get all of our high school students who would like to be on campus back onto our campuses with a minimum of 2 weeks of instruction in person prior to the end of the trimester. And I'll share with you some sample schedules. Again, these are designed from a student perspective, so you can see what it looks like in the life of a student. So this is a cohort A student who would be opting into in-person on-site instruction on Mondays and Tuesdays. You can see that students arrive, they go to their classes, they also finish before lunch. We would not be doing lunch service at our high schools. They would do their meal pickup, catch their buses, or travel home in whatever method they do so. They would have an opportunity to eat their lunch, and then they would have time to work on their asynchronous learning in the afternoon. We do, as I mentioned before, have advisory and intervention, which is typically called Hawk Time at Chihuahua High School, and EI for Enhancement Intervention Time at Pasco High. So that's, we see all these things here, but that's just, they're just called different things at different high schools. So that is scheduled in the schedule for students in the afternoon. So on Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. We do have office hours built in, so you can see in this example, I'm a student who sees my teachers in person Monday, Tuesday. If I need to check in and get some help from my teacher on a task, I have questions about my asynchronous learning, I have the opportunity to do so during office hours on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I have access to my teachers every day of the week, should I need that support. The next slide, I believe, is the cohort B example. So it's going to look pretty much exactly the same, just flip-flopped in the week. And then the last one is the distance learning. So if I am a student who, for whatever reason, again, my family is selecting for me to maintain virtual learning, then I'm going to be doing really my asynchronous work in the mornings, and I would continue to attend my classes synchronously in the afternoons, pretty much almost exactly like I do right now. I would be with those in-person peers during advisory and those intervention times. And again, I would have some access to my teachers via office hours as well. And I'd be happy to answer questions about the high school proposed timeline schedules and path forward.
I have a question. So for our Zoom classes already, it's around 40 minutes, and I feel like that is not enough time for students to understand subjects clearly. But on the schedule, it says that our classes are now 35 minutes, and that's not including how long it takes to get stuff out of your backpack and how long it takes kids to settle down and everything like that. So my question is just how come the time is shortened? I understand for safety measures, but I feel like that takes a lot of the one-on-one that the teachers are supposed to be giving to students that we're asking for so that we can go back to school.
So you're correct. You're reading that correctly. It is a 35-minute instead of a 40-minute period. If you want to take a look, well, you can see it there on Thursday and Friday. If you're looking, this is the in-person. If we looked also at the at-home, it matches between the two. So for teachers, they're doing those periods, 35 minutes, twice a week with every student. So they're twice a week with the A kids, Monday, Tuesday, twice a week with the B kids, Thursday, Friday, and twice a week on alternating. So Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday in the afternoons for the students who are opting to remain in distance learning. So in order to fit all of those pieces and parts in with a lunch break in the middle, that's how we landed at the 35 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make mine real short and quick. Again, thank you for the work. I have the same comment as I had on middle school, looking at, say, Kennewick, 4 hour and 45 minutes, twice a week, no lunch on site. So we're at 3 hours and 20 minutes. It feels like we could use another hour, related to Brisa's comment there, maybe 10 minutes per period there, so that again we are closer to what our other locals are doing.
Brisa's comment almost echoed mine perfectly. As a teacher teaching math, and so limited, scope, I don't know what English or anything else is like, but it's on those short snow days that we end up with a 35-minute class period. And it is beyond difficult. We always have to cut lessons short on those days because it's beyond difficult trying to get everything in a 35-minute class period. I would suggest going to at least a 45-minute. 45 or 50 is ideal. That would add 50 minutes to the schedule, and or 60 minutes, which would put it into the 12 o'clock range. I don't know if it's possible, but I would love to see if we can do that as well.
Sure. So just to respond to those concerns, we looked at the option of doing half of the periods on one day and half on the other day to provide a longer period, recognizing some of the concern of what you're talking about, Board President Phillips. And in the conversations that I've had with a variety of our stakeholders, the concern really coming from our buildings was that seeing my students only one time per week was a major concern. For those in person. And again, we have to split the kids in half because of COVID capacity and 6-foot distancing requirements. So we don't have an option to have them on site more than 2 days a week. And they just really felt like, I just really want to see my kids twice. I want to see them 2 days in a row. So we did really look at both those options of having a longer period, but then again, you wouldn't be able to get through all of them in a given day. The other piece in terms of extending the morning, so certainly we could extend the time of each period for the in-person. That will cut into the time that's available for the students and families who choose to do the distance learning. So we've tried very, very hard. Again, someone said it earlier in the meeting, there is no perfect schedule. There is certainly no making everybody happy, but we've done our very best to try to address the needs of both our in-person students and families and our distance students and families, knowing that for all families, whichever choice they make, if they have important reasons why they're making that. So we worked very hard to ensure that the schedule was equitable for both groups of students.
So we have the same teachers teaching in the morning as the afternoon, but they're teaching the in-person in the morning and they're teaching the at home in the afternoon.
Yes, that's correct. And the reason we did that, again, is for all the reasons I shared at the beginning of the high school portion of the presentation around teacher credentials, college and the high school course endorsements, the breadth of course offerings that are available, and the complexity of master scheduling when you have individualized student course of studies at the high school level.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to extend the day in the high school. That's not the same in the middle school, right? We are rearranging there, correct? Where we have distant teachers and we have, okay, yeah. I mean, I can see how it's next to impossible at the high school level. It is just difficult, and I agree. Seeing kids twice a week is really important. I'm very concerned about that timeline, and I don't know how you would go about buying at least 5 more minutes per class. So I don't know if that's even possible.
So do we have a feel for what the split's going to be in students learning, distance learning versus in-class learning?
In the number of students that will select the two options?
Yes, at the high school level.
I think our gut, and I don't have any official data to share with you, Mr. Christensen, is that it's going to be probably split down the middle like everything else in COVID. We did meet with the Student Superintendent Council, and obviously our student board reps are on the call and they could weigh in on how that conversation went. But even amongst that group of students, it was very divided. They had very good reasons why they wanted to be able to come back in person. They had equally good reasons for why they might not be able to come back in person. And that ranged from, personal and family health to even things like my parents working and I have to stay home to do childcare. So I'd love to come in person, but I'm going to have to stay in distance because I have a role to play in my family. So after hearing all of them, I think I felt even more convicted that we needed to have an equitable opportunity for our in-person and our at-home students at the high school level.
I think the consistent piece in the superintendent student advisory council was that the option should be there regardless of what you wanted to do. If you wanted to be in person, you should have that option. If you want to stay at home, you should have that option. And that the students on the call, regardless of how they were feeling about wanting to come back or not, were very respectful of each other's point of view and wanting to advocate that each other had the choice and the option that really was a real robust option. And I think we learned from what you heard happened at the elementary, that as we transitioned into the schedule, not anticipating the number of families who would want to stay at home, and now having to recalibrate a schedule that honors both in person and at home. So we really want to come out of the gate with the high school schedule, especially hearing what our superintendent student advisory council students had to say about the individual circumstances. And I am always impressed by our superintendent student advisory council students. And it was just really impressive to see them each articulate their needs while being very respectful and advocating for the other party's needs. So I think Jenny has developed a schedule here that really finds that balance, and I think would be very difficult to make adjustments to. I understand that other districts have done other things. Our priorities are different than other districts in our region, and I think Jenny's done a nice job of hitting this one right in the middle based on the superintendent student advisory feedback.
Jenny, are we concerned about getting the college and the high school enough? I mean, right now they're only seeing their teachers 70 minutes a week, and yet they're probably having to still do in order to get college credit, a full week of work. It doesn't look like there's a lot of time in here for the kids to go to their teachers for help in that if they're doing so much of the work on their own. Has there been concerns about that college and the high school and those kinds of credits that can't be shortened because of the nature of what they are?
So certainly for college and the high school courses, there is an expectation that we really meet the outcomes of that college level course. There is very limited flexibility in that. That said, I think that our teachers who are adjunct faculty for the university partners, as well as the students who have opted into those courses, are very aware of the commitment and the expectations of those courses. And they are college level courses, and many of our universities and even our community college locally, CBC, everything is distance right now. There's very few exceptions to that. So it truly is run like a college course, and the fact that it is a lot asynchronous and virtual, I think actually is in line with what you would find at our higher education partners. And I think our students are actually doing pretty well with those courses.
So I have a couple of comments. So first of all, if our student advisory council can sit in a room and listen to each other and be respectful and appreciate each other's side, maybe we should send them back to Washington, D.C. to model how to behave back there. The other thing is, if we really have half and half, and this is at any level, of course at the elementary level, we've already seen that there's more in blended learning than there is staying at home. So that's probably not going to be the case. I wouldn't expect that to change. At the middle school level, at the high school level, if it really is 50-50, then maybe we could take the blended, because there shouldn't be that many. We could put the blended in school 4 days a week. Now, I'm not saying that we should do that, but I think that may be a possibility when we get to that point. And same with the high school. If we really do have half of our students choosing to do at home, then that should free up more class space. And rather than having really small classes, maybe we have a little bigger classes 4 days a week. And the other thing I would say is this, is I believe, so I like the idea that we allow flexibility at the high school level. I believe as we get through this, we're going to see COVID cases drop significantly. And I think that I don't know how many kids are going to want to come back to school. Are we able to accommodate all of them? Should we choose to have a significant number decide that, you know what, I'm done with the at-home learning. I'm ready to go back to school in April or beginning of May. So just, I don't need an answer, just some things to consider.
Yeah, we in this high school model schedule, we have the capacity, if every single student wanted to be on site, that we can do that. And certainly we will keep an eye on what the interest from students and families and the actual attendance looks like as we move forward with these plans. And that might be a reason why we might not increase to 4 days, because we would want the capacity to welcome back those other students when they're ready to do so at the high school level. But thank you for the comments.
Dr. Rodriguez, I really appreciate the timeline. You really did shorten it, and I'm very appreciative of that. What is one thing that I found a little bit different was, first of all, in middle school, I understand we need to bring less students back, and you want to do that slowly. But when we have a February 18th start date and a February 25th, those are on Thursdays. Is there a reason we're not sending them back on the Mondays of those weeks?
Yes. So Monday the 15th is President's Day. It's a federal holiday and we don't have school. So that's why that day wasn't there. We are currently working with labor partners on a couple of pieces that could impact things. So we are at Wednesdays. That would be the 17th is our asynchronous day every week. It has been since the start of this year, and we really wanted to maintain that consistency for students, families, and staff, so that wouldn't be an in-person. So we're looking at Thursday the 18th. If you recall, we're still on that AB cohort. So your B cohort, 6th and 7th grade students, would come on that Thursday, Friday. Your A cohort kids would start then Monday, Tuesday. So the reason it's a full week before 8th grade begins is we'd like to have all of our 6th and 7th grade students have the opportunity to have 2 days on site before we add the 8th graders back to the mix. Also, our health guidance has been that we should stagger starts. And from a capacity perspective, it would be very helpful to our middle school principals and staff to not have everybody at once. So that's the rationale for the staggered timeline at the middle level.
And I do appreciate that. The high school starts on the 22nd, so we have our 8th graders starting later than everybody else. It would have. I know that you did a great job on this timeline. It would be so nice if we could move that middle school timeline up a week. It would still be a week behind the elementary, but is that just an impossibility?
So the middle school timeline for 6 and 7 matches when we would be moving all the elementaries also to the 3 separate models. So they're starting at the same time, and that really is, we've shortened our timeline as much as we possibly can to allow for the staffing transfers that have to occur. So once again, we need to know from our families how many want distance, how many want in person. That will dictate the number of distance learning teaching jobs. We then have to post those, people have to put in for them. We have to transfer the students to the teachers in the model that they've selected. So it just will take us a couple of days to do that as a district. So we have shortened it as much as we possibly can. We do recognize that the 8th graders are starting after the 9th graders in the proposed timelines. The 10th through 12th graders actually start the Monday after that. So our 8th graders aren't our last ones in. It's our oldest kids that are actually last in line.
So the start date on the high school is March 1st.
So the freshmen are scheduled on February 22nd. And again, we have that rotation, and then we have 10th through 12th scheduled the very following week. There we go. That might be a nice graphic to share.
So Amy, if I could pop in here real quick. So as a school board, you do have the option of taking action tonight if that on the timelines. If that's something as a school board you'd like to do, there's a process for moving it from reports to action, and you've done this before. So we would need somebody to make a motion. You would need to vote to be able to move the action on the timelines to the action portion of the agenda. We would need you to do that first. I do have a graphic that you could use for the discussion, and then should you choose to take action tonight, then there's a suggested motion there. So I would turn it over to you, Board President Phillips, to see if there's interest on the board of moving timelines to action for this evening.
Thank you. So are there any concerns with the timelines? Are the timelines okay with the board? Let's go to that question first, and then we will go to the question of whether we want, yes?
I'm going to ask that you take action first on whether you want to move it from a report to an action, and then engage in the discussion if possible.
Okay.
Well, before we do that, do you need action on this, or is this just we would like to have action?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Steve. So I think, and we've talked about this a lot, technically, probably not. We wouldn't need board action, but the community, I think, would like to see board action. The other school districts locally have taken action. So it causes confusion for our community and for our constituents. And so our recommendation is that you take action. Now, whether you want to do that tonight or next meeting, that's up to you. We'll move forward on the timelines, but I do think in terms of just clarity and transparency around board governance and consistency locally, it would be more clear to the community that you've taken action on the timelines. It's a great governance question, though.
So I will make the motion unless somebody else has the other question. Procedure. I move to place the elementary and secondary transition timelines on action items on tonight's agenda.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to move to place the elementary and secondary transition timelines on action items on tonight's agenda. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Lincoln?
Yes.
Mr. Campos?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman?
Yes.
So this graphic represents a condensed place for you to have a discussion about the timelines. They're outlined here. Jenny's happy to continue to answer questions about the timelines that I can't answer. But the graphic is really intended to put all those timelines in one place to help support the board through discussion. And then there is a suggested motion on the next slide when you're ready. I'd be happy to advance the slide.
So just another procedure question. If this timeline happens to float a few days one way or the other, do we have to take action again, or is this, can we word it so that we don't have to?
Oh, that's a great question. Is Sarah? I'm going to defer to Sarah Thornton, procedural question.
Mr. Christensen, could you repeat the question to make sure I understand what you're asking?
Yeah, so we're taking action on these timelines. They look pretty definitive. My question is if we come, after doing a little more research, we decide that we can move one way or the other a few days, do we need to take action again? Or can we word the motion so that we accept these as recommendations?
I believe that you can word it so that you accept them as recommendations. You could add wording based on operational feasibility.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion here. I move to accept the elementary and secondary transition timelines as recommended based on operational feasibility.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to accept the timeline this evening on operational feasibility. I'll open it up to the board for discussion. If there's no discussion, then Steve, do you have anything to add?
Just getting ready to say yes.
If there's no discussion, I would entertain a motion, or excuse me, we can have a roll call vote. Ms. Richardson?
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Lincoln?
Yes.
Mr. Campos?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Lehrman?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure I can say that again. Steve, do you want to cap off that recommendation again?
Yeah, it's just the action, the recommended action, just taking out presented and put recommended, and then subject to operational feasibility.
Okay, I move to accept so the motion is passed. I move to accept the elementary and secondary transition times as recommended due to operational feasibility. Now moving on to, is there any further board discussion on this?
No, I just wanted to thank the team and Jenny Rodriguez in the heavy lifting that this work has been, and just really thank the team for tonight's presentation and the board's patience as we've navigated a really meaty board presentation that that we're proud to have presented, and thank you for your patience and your action this evening. So with that, Assistant Superintendent Sarah Thornton has a report on the Voters' Rights Act, and then we are requesting an executive session this evening.
Good evening, Board President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and board members. Tonight, I'm going to present to you some background steps and a timeline, and request board direction to update you on your work on the Voting Rights Act. So as you know, we've been discussing the Voting Rights Act for several months, and actually back since 2018. The change to the Washington Voting Rights Act in 2018 gives the board the option to consider whether protected class candidates for office have been historically unsuccessful in district elections, and determine that where there has been evidence of vote dilution, the new law gives the board the opportunity to correct that through a redistricting process. Like I said, you began studying this back in 2018, and we were, as a staff, directed to engage outside counsel and a demographer to explore the feasibility of moving forward. You last met with John Safarli, who is our outside counsel, in October. He was on the call earlier tonight and regrets that he was not able to stay on for the duration of the board meeting, but he is aware of the information that we're sharing with you this evening. We did receive direction from you in October to move forward to develop timelines to begin the public engagement process, and that's what I'd like to discuss with you tonight. What I would like to do is get formal board approval next week to move forward with the project. This is a project where a significant amount of public engagement will be required. We would need to provide official public notice of the proposal and hold a public hearing at least 1 week prior to board action. Also, in our previous conversations regarding this topic, you as a board have expressed a significant interest in making sure that members of the public are provided a robust opportunity to consider the plans that are being put forward and have a robust opportunity to provide input to the board before any final action. So in looking at a timeline and building that timeline, we want to make sure that there is adequate opportunity to do that. The law does provide for some different options for timelines if the board takes action either before or after January 15th in any given year. So if you as a board take action on this between this past January 16th of 2021 and January 15th of 2022, to approve a change in your election system, an election would be required in November of 2022. If you as a board took action after January 15th of 2022, then that on changing the election system, then the next election where the change would be implemented would be November of 2023. Because there was no board action prior to January 15th of this current year, the option for November 2021 election is not possible.
I have a question, Sarah. You said you will ask for action. Your words were next week, and then it says February 6th, which is a Saturday. Do we have to do something next week?
You do not. That's probably a typo on my PowerPoint. That would be at the next board meeting, which I believe is February 9th.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Scott?
It did. I said it's late.
For options being considered for the timeline, we looked at this spring right now, spring of 2021. We looked at fall of 2021 or winter of 2022, and we were concerned about a couple of factors that could adversely impact public engagement. The concern with moving forward this spring of 2021 for a public information campaign is the concern there is that people are we're working through the expansion of in-person learning. There are current limits on in-person meetings. The changes or the restrictions in the Open Public Meetings Act that I discussed with you at our last board meeting have been continued. And so we know that for the foreseeable future in spring of 2021, everything would need to be held remotely. If we moved forward with a public information campaign in winter of 2022, and the board also decided to run a levy in winter of 2022, then those two information campaigns would also potentially overlap. The other issue with that timeline, if we looked at winter of 22, is that there'd be a reduced opportunity for interested candidates to be able to be recruited prior to the May 2022 filing period. So we felt like the most viable option would be a fall of 2021 public information campaign. And what we would do is between now and then, we would work with the demographer to develop the options that would be presented to the public. We'd provide that to you in a report either at the end of July or the beginning of August. And on this graphic here, I've highlighted August 10th as the meeting where we would present that to the board. And then between August 10th and the end of October, we would engage in public information to educate the community about the Voting Rights Act, about what the board is considering with the change to the election system. And that would also provide the board with an opportunity to hear from the public, both through public forums, which we could schedule at the end of September, and also in a formal public hearing, which we would schedule likely in October. that would provide 10 weeks or more of a public information campaign where we would then schedule board action sometime either in October or November. Here I've highlighted October 26th. The board would just need to take action on the change to the election system prior to January 15th of 2022. So this is the recommended timetable.
Are you stopping for questions?
I am.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
So if we did that by November or January, before January of 22, then the election would be in 23? Is that what, or would it be November 22?
November of 22. The board would make a decision in October or November of 2021. Interested candidates would then have until May of the May of 2022 filing period is when they would file, and then the election would be November of 22.
One of my concerns is because of the COVID thing, is being able to get the information out and having public forums and public information out to get the people out. That's one of my concerns during that time frame. Who knows what's going to happen?
And I think that's that really is the big unknown, Sherry. The public meeting restrictions have been continued for the duration of the declaration of this state of emergency. So we just don't know when those would be lifted, although there will be at some point an in-person option that might facilitate a bit more of the public discussion. But we also have been able to, as a district staff, been able to successfully navigate some public processes earlier this summer where we held forums and were able to seek public input into our work. So I think it's doable if we move forward with the fall timeline. That at least gives us a little bit more time to make those public options available.
I think it's critical that we get a lot of community input on this, because this is a big change. And so this timeline, this is 2 months. I know we've been talking about it for 2 years, but I bet if we went and asked 100 people in our community, there's probably not one that could tell us that, yeah, I've heard about that. So I think whatever we do, we need to start getting the word out now. Just let people know that in the fall, we will be talking about districting for school board directors. And just so that gets on their radar, because I think we want as much input as we can get on this. So I'm fine with the time frame. I just think if this is what we're going to do, we need to start talking about it in April and May and June, just so people are aware come August when we start talking about it.
Absolutely. And with this, with the target of a fall schedule, we do have flexibility, Steve, on either side of those dates where we can roll it out sooner. We have more time in October, November, December, should the board be hearing the feedback from the community and decide that we do need more time to get that input.
So and we've talked about this before. I know there's never a good time to do this because it's difficult. We'd be talking about redistricting during a time when we have in 2021 here, November of 2021, an election for 3 current board seats. I don't know all of those who are up for election, if they plan on running again. I do worry that if they're not and there's no other candidates, that, or people might look at it and go, you know what, I don't want to run 2 years in a row. Maybe I'll wait and see how this shakes up and run in my district, and kind of short circuit the number of candidates for the next election. I mean, that can't prevent us from doing what we're going to do. Just possible challenges that we might see in getting candidates in 2021.
I also think that's really important. We've got to get the word out so before this election, so that people realize if they are running this May and they make it on the board, that they are going to have to, most likely they're going to have to rerun in a year. I know if I was a candidate, if that happened to me as a candidate, I would absolutely want to know I was going to have to do two campaigns 2 years in a row. So I don't know how to help the candidates know that, but I think that's an important piece. I do think we should move forward with this, and I think the fall timeline is great, and I do think it will give us adequate time to engage the community, whether we do it through Zoom or hopefully we're back in person. But here's to hoping. But I do think it is important, and I agree with Steve that we do need to get the word out as early as possible, and let those people who are running for the school board know that they're going to have to do it twice.
No, that's a very good point, and we can make sure that we have public information available on the district website, and that we have that pushed out so that people who might be interested would be aware of the board's work on this issue. Since the board has not taken formal action on this yet, I would like to bring this back to you for action at the next board meeting so that we're all clear and on the same page about how we're going to move forward. So just so you know, that's the plan, so long as that is acceptable to the board.
I think that's great. If anybody is against it, let me know. We've been doing this so long, I feel like we are all in agreement with this. But are there any objections? Okay, sounds like you can move forward with that.
All right, thank you. Then, I do have a policy first reading for you. If you're ready to move on to the next item, Ms. Phillips.
Yes, please move forward.
This is the first time in COVID board meetings that we've brought you a regular policy unrelated to COVID for board approval. This is first reading of policy 2410, high school graduation requirements. The edit is being made to this policy to update it to be consistent with WASDA model policies. I'm showing you a non-redlined version. You have the redlined version in your packet. We deleted the bulk of, yes.
What we're seeing on our screens is your PowerPoint. Is that what you intended?
No, I am going to stop sharing and try to share again. I'm so sorry. Let's try.
I was waving at you, trying to get your attention.
Sorry, I couldn't
Sorry to interrupt.
I couldn't see your little face. Can you see the policy now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So the redline version that you have in your packet is very difficult to read. So I wanted to show you what the clean version would look like. Basically, what we're doing is removing the bulk of the policy language and putting it in the procedure, just so that we can be a little more nimble in making changes as changes occur at the state level. And if there are no questions or comments regarding the update to this policy, we will have this for you on the consent agenda for approval at the next meeting.
I love the idea of being more nimble and more flexible. So I think this is great. And so I'm all for it. Are there any objections or any comments? All right, let's put it on action items in the next board meeting. Is that all you had, Mrs. Thornton?
It is. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here at another monumental board meeting. This might be our worst yet. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. So thank you for being here.
We're not done. We have
We're not done?
No, we have agenda review and an executive session.
Yes, I know we have it. I know we have an executive session. So thank you for all being here. We will, Ms. Whitney, can you address future agenda items?
You bet. So we will have a study session at our next board meeting which is on February 9th. It's going to be probably an extended study session, and it'll be focused on diversity and equity and inclusion update. We've been doing those focus groups with our students. There's been a lot learned so far, and we're looking forward to sharing those themes that were surfaced with the board during that study session. Like I said, we may be asking for a little bit longer study session. I'll discuss that with school board members as that gets closer. During the board meeting, we'll do a COVID update. We'll also provide a budget update and a facilities update potentially. And the Voting Rights Act will be coming back to you on an action item, and you will see the graduation policy on the consent agenda. I also wanted to let the board know that the OPMA restrictions have been extended. So the restriction on the in-person public meetings have been extended through the duration of the COVID emergency declaration by the governor. So we're in phase 1, so there's still no in-person option available to us, and we will notify you as a board when that changes and it becomes available so that you can revisit the discussion at that time. I am requesting an executive session under 4231.10.1G for personnel. It's the final superintendent evaluation. So Ms. Phillips, how much time do you think you'll need?
Let's say 45 minutes. Hopefully we'll be done before then because it's late.
And requesting no action, correct?
And requesting no action. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned.